and I'm going to be with you right throughout the morning as your MC, and I'm also going to be here driving the bus when it comes to the questions that are going to come in. So we'd love for you to be as interactive as possible all morning. We'd be delighted if you would. So I just want to first of all let you know the Twitter handle and hashtag. So the Twitter handle is @FRS Recruitment. That is, FRS Recruitment are going to be live tweeting right throughout the day. And the hashtag are home truths. Okay, home truths. You'll see those up on your screens around throughout as well, home truths. The explanation of that and the rationale behind that will become clear as the morning goes on. So as you can see here, FRS Recruitment is the Twitter handle, and then secondly, our hashtag is home truths. Now, in addition, we're also going to be running Mentimeter. Now, in addition, during the queue and during the panel sessions, of which we've two, during the panel sessions and also when Professor Ian Robertson is on stage as well, we're going to have this running in the background, so you'll have the instructions at the top. Okay, so we've 100 likes now. Okay, perfect. So, now that we know that you're all able to get onto that and that you're good to go from that score, now what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to ask, Aaron, can you move us on to the next, so we've got a question for you, which is this one. Now I really wanted to think about how to ask you this, because all of these are opportunities, all of them. Attracting staff, retaining staff, cultivating great culture, adapting to hybrid working, motivating people. They're all opportunities. That's not to say they're not challenging. So the question then is, which of these opportunities are you currently finding challenging? And this is going to shape the conversation that we're going to have, particularly with our panelists. Okay, so attracting staff. Okay, yeah. A lot of challenge in the room, isn't there? Okay, so so far I'm seeing about one in I was going to say 1 in 3 of you, it's actually more. It's around about 2 in 3 of you. I'm doing here the maths in my head as I'm going. About 2/3 of people have said attracting staff. And that is going to shape the entire start of the day. We're going to hear from Peter Cosgrove all around the future of work, and then we're going to have a panel discussion solely around attracting staff. Now, so we're at 109 people who have voted here. And by the way, I did say that you can choose all that apply. Okay, so that really does give us a good sense. So that's brilliant. That's great to see that you can use that. And also, afterwards, when Peter comes on stage, then I am going to move this slide on so that then any questions that you have for either Peter or any of the panel in the first case, we'll take them in there. So that's brilliant. Thanks, Aaron. Yep, you can pop back to the other slide. Right. So I've told you about the running order. I've told you about I've told you about the social media. You know how to use Mentimeter. We're all good. Now, instead of me talking about the theme, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to invite Colin Donnery to come on stage. Colin, if I could just ask you to come on stage here with me. And I'd just really like to hear 2 things, really, if we could. So just in case any of you don't know him, Colin Donnery is, of course, Group CEO of the group. And what I'd just like to hear, Colin, is it was your choice today to have the theme of developing great teams at work.
A team choice.
Did you get that? You're supposed to laugh, lads. You're supposed to laugh at that one out. Exactly. So in that case, why is it that you chose that theme, and why is it so important today?
Yeah, so creating and developing, great teams in the new world of work. Like, first of all, just finding people on its own probably isn't what we need out there at the moment. And then looking at the sort of new world of work, I think we're sort of in it. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, what our great partners and clients are telling us really are all the challenges they're having at the moment, and for years, and Peter, look, Cosgrove, we're colleagues over a number of years, and he's talked about this, the future of work, and I think we're sort of in it at the moment. So to try and give, I suppose, people insights into what's happening on the ground out there, and a mix of the sort of academic and the practical and what's happening on the ground. We've also some insights. We're releasing our annual survey results on Thursday, so we'll have a bit around that of actually what you as employers are seeing out there, but also what candidates are seeing. And there's a definite mismatch starting to happen there at the moment, which has been driven by the economics of things as we see them out there. There's our employers are saying there's a little bit uncertain about how the future looks now over the next 6 months, 9 months, but candidates and employees are really full steam ahead. Everything's great. So,
and has there ever been a time where there has been a match between candidates and the companies recruiting them? Anytime I've ever talked to you, there's always a mismatch.
Yeah, but the mismatches sort of move, you know, so it becomes aligned, and typically what happens, it goes in economic cycles. So in downturns, people sit tight in their jobs. They tend not to move as much, you know what I mean? And they look for different things from employers as to what to move. Like, you know, in good times, it's all about salary, etc. In bad times, it's about security. So as employers, we need to navigate that sort of path. Really, you know?
Okay. So. And it seems to be a path full of opportunity indeed, as well as we're going to hear about today. Also, of course, Colin, it's no mistake that we are here in Croke Park, and that is due to the relationship that you have with the GAA. And maybe just to contextualise that, if I could ask Aaron again, can you please play a video for us, please? And we can all head to New York for a moment. Well, 40 moments, if I could just ask, please.
The memory of home, I believe, it stays with most people. When they leave home, they're not really gone. A neighbour of ours when I was young, he lived in New York. And I said to him, "You never came home." "I did," he said. "Every night of the year, before I go to sleep, I'd walk out, I'd go up over the shore. He'd been dreaming about home."
The unmistakable voice, of course, of Mícheál Ó Muircheartaigh there. So every night, that person that he knew in Kerry came home as he walked the cows out, looking over that majestic view. Colin, 70 minutes of home, the relationship with GAA Go. Tell us all about that.
So 4 years ago in Sydney, we sponsored a match between Galway and Kilkenny. And it was just really great success. And the GAA came to us after and said, "Look, would you be interested in partnering with us on some things going forward?" And they gave us a couple of different sort of options and things we could do. And they showed us this product called GAA Go, which is effectively the streaming service worldwide for every GAA match. And it sort of just, I went, God, that's a bit different. How would that work? So we partnered with them actually in the February before COVID. So it was, we were due to have this event back in well, it would have been April 2020, right before COVID, to launch that. So really what it's about, we're a cooperative. So I suppose for us, it's about more than money and more than profit. So it was, could we attract Irish people home from abroad? When we looked at it in Australia alone, after the last recession, 90,000 Irish people emigrated to Australia. And we just went, 90,000 Irish people. And we looked at I suppose, what would you say, you know, we're looking to attract talent into Ireland, and well, why not start with those people, our own people? So we built this campaign with the help of what I can only say is probably just an amazing creative agency called Ringers. We won an international award just a couple of months ago, beating McLaren F1 to sort of the prize, which is just amazing. So, and really what it was transporting people home from these places and giving them a window into life and not interrupting their GAA, you know, sort of matches and that, but just, you know, giving them a taste of home in a way that, you know, wasn't pushy or whatever, you know, and it's just been such a fantastic success. And obviously no one really sort of sums that up as well as Mícheál Ó Muircheartaigh, really, you know, so.
Definitely, that is for sure. He does a great job of that, and indeed, I mean, I didn't know there was 90,000. And sometimes I'm very fortunate. I get to travel quite a bit. You can hear Irish accents all over the world. You really can. Sometimes they're for very sad reasons due to emigration. But I suppose the difference today is that there is huge opportunity and choices as they come home. So on that note, we're going to begin the main conference now. Colin, thank you very much for opening up here with us. You're going to come back on stage later on today with Peter McKenna and Breed Stack as well to talk more about home truths and where that's going to go.
And where we're going,
brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, can you put your hands together please for Colin Donnery? So So now I'm going to invite Peter Cosgrove to come on stage. Peter is going to take us through what the post-COVID world of work looks like, and also how we can prepare our teams and maximally prepare ourselves for it. I've seen Peter in action before. He's full of energy, so there's no doubt about it. In the right space and in the right time, you're going to hear all about a whistle-stop tour of where the future is going to take us. So, Peter Cosgrove, Future of Work.
So good morning, everyone. I'm going to start with a quick story. There's two guys at the side of a river and they see a baby floating down the river, so they run in, they save the baby, and they're feeling very good about themselves. And then they see two more babies floating down the river. So they run in again, they save the two babies, and they go to the side of the river. And this happens for about 20 minutes. And then one of the guys starts to walk away, and the other guy goes, "Hey, where are you going? Are you not going to help me?" And he goes, No, I'm going to go upstream to see who's throwing the babies in the water. Now, this is actually from a book by Dan Heath called Upstream, where he says that during a crisis like this pandemic we've been through, we're very good at downstream thinking. We're very good at focusing on problems in front of us. We're not very good at looking up and looking at the bigger picture. So hopefully over the next 30, 35 minutes, we'll give you an understanding of some of the things that are coming down the line. Because this word disruption, which we've talked about in the last few years, has been happening for a long time. I mean, change has never happened so fast, but it will never happen so slow again. Think about that for a second. However fast you think things are moving today, it's the slowest it's ever going to happen. So we hear a lot about this word exponential growth. We don't understand exponential growth. 1 to 32 is 32 spaces on a chessboard, but exponentially, it's 1 to 2.1 billion. It's very hard for humans to understand that. And in the COVID world, when Italy closed down 2 and a bit years ago their schools, Bill de Blasio in New York said, "Oh no, we know Italy have closed their schools, but we're miles away from that." They did it 6 days later because we don't understand exponential growth. We also need to realize the old models don't work very well. You know, I used to be told, don't speak to strangers. I used to be told, don't get into a stranger's car. I certainly was told, don't go to a stranger's house. Well, guess what? So all of that's changed. In the world of business, you can see that we now have banks that don't even have real estate offices, many teenagers out there with Revolut accounts, but even more scarily than that, we've got companies in Korea, this is a WhatsApp company in Korea, which just decided to become a bank 5 years ago, and 30% of Koreans now have a bank account with Kakao Talk. That's not even a bank. Because the speed of change, airlines might have taken 64 years to get to 50 million users, Pokemon Go did it in 19 days. And actually, Call of Duty did it in a week. So it's probably not going to be that long before a company literally will have 50 million customers in one day. Now, why? Because of two words, digital and connectivity. Now, we really understood this in the last few years. If you ask someone in banking what they do, they say, well, I do banking. If you ask someone in tax. But if you ask someone from a tech firm, they don't say they do technology. They say, we kind of do everything. Because they feel it's limitless, because they can just move from industry to industry. Amazon started off as a bookstore, then it became an everything store. Now it's literally in research, innovation, satellites. It's even in areas like healthcare, where it can take 30 billion off the whole healthcare industry just by saying it's going to get involved. That's how scary they are. We see it in the world of jobs. Kodak had 154,000 workers at its height. Instagram was sold for over $1 billion with 19 workers. You know, all of us use cameras now for our smartphones. Even those of us with digital cameras, I can guarantee they're now stuck in a cupboard somewhere. In America in 1978, they started doing a census on what was the most popular job in every state in America. And there was lots of different, there was secretary, there was farmer, there was truck driver. But when they did it again in 2014, 40 out of the 50 states, the number one job was truck driver. That's a lot of people. And guess what this is? This is a driverless truck. It's been on the road for a few years. Yes, it might take 20 years for compliance, governance, safety, but it's coming. And we already have companies like Volvo saying we'll accept all liability when cars are in autonomous mode. So it's essentially saying the car insurance industry is gone. When, we don't know, but eventually it'll be gone. Good news, other things will go. We won't need car parks anymore because the car will literally drive up and walk away again. Also, good news, we won't need clampers because the driverless car can just drive away from the clamping company. So it won't be all bad. We see it in the world of construction, 3D printed houses. Dubai are now printing a 3D printed skyscraper, and the sky's not even the limit. We had somebody in the International Space Station who broke their finger, and with a 3D machine and a blueprint, they were able to fix a splint and fix their finger, because guess what? It's pretty expensive to get someone to fly up to space. When you conflate these technologies together, it gets frightening. Under Armour created a sneaker where they decided to use AI, where they said, we'll just give it all the benchmarks of what we want, you know, cost, weight, et cetera, and within a day, using a supercomputer, came up with, I don't know, 10 million ideas and they picked the best one. And then rather than going to Asia to create the shoe, they just 3D printed the shoe. So a 3-year process had essentially become a 3-day process. Now, clearly this is just starting, but this is what happens when you conflate these technology. It's obviously happening in professional services, tax jobs being taken by TurboTax. Ross is an artificial intelligent lawyer. Harvard X, the online Harvard program, the first year it came about in 2016, more people signed up to Harvard Online than have ever gone to Harvard, which has been around since the 1600s. And we're going to start seeing this more and more. These are jobs in professional sectors because guess what? Professional sector jobs are more expensive and companies are going to try and get rid of as many as they can. Now, many people say, don't worry, my kids don't want to do any sort of those jobs. They just want to be an influencer like Lil McQuella. Well, great news, Lil McQuella has about 5 million followers, but she doesn't exist. And she sells things and she's got views. And when I say she, I shouldn't say she because this person doesn't exist. So then what happened 2 years ago? So with all this happening and happening for a number of years, we moved to this, where we start seeing people pointing guns at us, hugging through plastic, going to the cinema in boats, anything we could do to reconnect. But this was the big thing. This is what happened. We suddenly realized, do we all actually have to sit in traffic for an hour every day? Does this make sense? And I've kind of been looking at this for a number of years, well before COVID. And when you used to type in the word future of work, this was the first picture that came up, a guy in a suit in a jacuzzi. I still don't understand it, but that used to be our understanding of what the future of work was. This is really the future of work, because this is the picture we used to think of when someone said, I'm working from home. And we never said working from home, we said working from home, because literally it wasn't work. It was shirking from home or it was not working. That's what we thought it was. But now that everybody's done it, we realize all the positives. We can now work from anywhere. There's less bureaucracy. There's more empathy. Guess what? If a cat walks across your screen or a kid walks into the room, it's not the end of the world anymore. So it's real, and it's much, much more convenient. But before we get too excited, working from anywhere quite quickly became working from everywhere. We suddenly realized that it wasn't for everybody. Not everybody has a home office where they can just go away and work. And while it's a lot more convenient, almost nobody said to me it was more fun. And that's led to some of the issues that I'll talk about around burnout. So let's think firstly about the culture of organization. So what is culture? Culture in simple terms, people, what they say, culture is what happens when the boss leaves the room. Now, what's the problem here? Well, what if the boss is never in the room and the people aren't in the room? How's the culture look like? Well, the one thing we have to realize is work hasn't been good for a long time. If you type work is into Google, you can do this yourself, you get very, very positive answers. And while people say to me, people don't leave work, they leave their boss, you're right, but unfortunately that even gives you worse answers. And if you type in synonyms for work into Google, you'll see things like labor, exertion, effort, slog, drudgery. You don't actually see very many positive words. So what is it about the culture? Well, the good news is culture isn't your table tennis table, your drinks on your Friday, all of these things. They're all expressions and channels of culture. Your culture is essentially your mission, your vision, and your values, driven by your leadership. And the best way to exert those is through soft skills like communication, empathy, respect, trust. And they're going to be the absolute currencies of culture of the future. The challenge we have, though, is companies are getting back into this world and they're focusing on policies and processes, not practices. So to give you an example, lots of tech firms years ago got very excited because they said, we're wonderful, we've offered now paternity leave for men, aren't we great? And then they realized no men were taking it. Why? Well, we had a policy for it, but actually people kind of realized no one else was taking it. Maybe it wouldn't look good if I took it, so people didn't take it. Think about how that might work today with this whole idea of distance bias. We've all understood this idea that the more you work outside of the office, the more you've worked from home, the less you're seen, the less chance you're being promoted. The further you work from the head office, the less chance you have of being promoted. We don't do this on purpose. People do it unconsciously because there is an out of sight, out of mind. Now we're living in this new world. What will happen if all the leaders decide you don't have to come back to work, you can work 2 days from home, 3 days from home, but all the leaders start coming back 4 or 5 days a week? Suddenly there's these unwritten rules in your organization which says, I know I don't have to come back to work, but I'm kind of getting the feeling they do want me to come back. And this is a challenge because we aren't really thinking about this from everyone else's perspective. We like to think we're very inclusive as organizations, but I'm going to ask you a quick question. I'm going to ask you all to think about who your top 5 friends are. Just have a think. And guess what? I'm not going to challenge you and ask you to challenge, is it Mary or Jane? Don't worry, no one else has to know who they are. Just put them in your head. So now I'm going to ask you, imagine you wrote down your name and your top 5 friends, and I asked you to write down your age, your gender, whether you're married, do you have a university degree, your race, and your sexuality. And then I asked you to do it for your friends. Would they be a little like you, or in all honesty, really like you? So hands up how many people have more than 50% of their friends of the opposite gender? 1. Wow. 2. That's just one of them. So literally we had the whole world to hang out with anyone we wanted. And who do we hang out with? People exactly like us. Why? Because they agree with all my opinions, because they're very like me. And therefore it's wonderful. But here's the challenge in organizations. We're much less likely to hang out and understand people who come from different backgrounds and different points of view because we don't see them as much, because that's an homophily, they call it. Birds of a feather flock together. But if we think about how COVID affected men and women, just if you take gender, if men and women were both working at home and they had kids, kids were 3 times more likely to interrupt the mother than the father. Even so, things haven't been equally spread. Somebody told me this, and this is something I hadn't thought about. Someone said to me, I love Zoom. I'm only 5'1". Everybody looks the same height on Zoom. So these are things you don't think about unless you put yourself in someone else's shoes. So then what about the world of hybrid work? How are we going to do this, and how's it going to work? Because what really the next year is just going to be experimentation. It's going to take us a while to get rid of it. We're used to this. The first part is understanding people's behaviors are not rational. In Italy, a number of years ago, they realized people weren't paying their parking tickets. They were sending out very angry letters and they wouldn't pay them. So they decided to change it. So they sent out a very polite letter giving them directions to their local courthouse. And when people opened the letter and pictured themselves going to court, they paid their ticket very quickly. So sometimes you actually have to start thinking, what are the motivations of your staff? And even if you survey your staff and have been surveying your staff, this isn't as relevant as you think. Because if you surveyed your staff 5 years ago before this all happened, almost none of them would have said, I'll work from home 5 days a week. Because they actually couldn't even imagine that was possible. Now everybody is 5 days a week at home. It's like, well, I never have to go back. So surveying is very tricky because we're quite change averse. We like to think we embrace change, but we're generally like the status quo. And if I'm at home, the idea of having to uproot again and go back into work, that's quite tricky. So we've seen how some companies have done this. Investment banks in the UK have said 5 days a week in the office, that's it. And some people, oh, they're crazy, they're going to lose all their staff. Not really, because the one thing they've got is certainty and authenticity. They know what they want, because a lot of companies are saying things like, you only have to come in 2-3 days a week. But then their manager going, oh, are you not in again today? And we all know what that sounds like. And many, many people are then going, well, what is the right answer? Well, guess what? If you have 2 people in the exact same team who do the same job, it could be different. If someone's worked for you for 10 years in a relationship manager role and someone's worked for 6 months, but they're the same level, guess what? The person with 6 months needs to be coming in every day. They've never met anyone. They've relationship capital. They need to build this up that they've never done before. So be very careful about anything you give out as a guarantee to your staff. Because KPMG in the UK are about 6 months ahead of us. They were saying, oh, you can work from anywhere. We're a very progressive organization. Now they're saying, nope, come back 4 days a week. Because nobody was coming back. And people aren't coming back. And however easy you think it's going to get people to come back, they're not going to come back. Okay? Nick Bloom, who's the kind of global expert in working from home, says there's going to be a huge gap in terms of what employers want and employees want in terms of how many days they want to work. He also said one of the key things is people don't have a clear start or finish to their day anymore. And he said this is going to be a huge challenge. We think it's a real positive, but actually the employer is going to do a lot better than the employee out of this. Because even though we've been doing this for about 2 years, we still have people sitting in, with books on their laptop and they haven't even set themselves up properly. And it might seem crazy, but not everybody has this great work balance. And a lot of people aren't this kind of consultant mindset where they can just grab a laptop, plonk it down and work all day, and then they do it at home. A lot of people really like their workspace, and the idea of routing them up 2 days a week to go somewhere else and back again doesn't work very well for them. So we have to make sure that we aren't presuming that everybody has what we have at home. But here to me is the biggest challenge we've got, when people tell me they're more productive at home, because I'm not sure they are. But most people will disagree, and people get very angry when you say that. People are definitely working longer hours because the commute has almost been taken up by more work. But remember, productivity, think of the phrase, everything that counts can't be counted. Of course, you can do more tasks, but what about mentoring? What about on-the-job training? What about esprit de corps? What about that kind of group dynamic? All of the things, networking. All of these things you can't measure today because I didn't do 2 tasks and therefore I didn't tick 2 things off. All of those things get slightly lost because we're not all individuals, we're part of a collective. So think about a time you had a great day at work in the last 10 years. You won a new client, you had a successful pitch, you won a promotion. Were you just sitting in a room on your own or were you there with other people? And do you expect everyone else to have the same experience as you, or do you say, no, screw them, they can all just sit in the room and do that? It's not the same experience, and it is nuanced. While people hate the commute and they want to work from home, there's probably going to be times where people may not do their best work sitting in bed in their pajamas. We may feel we do, but maybe not. And for me, there's absolutely no guarantee that when you're a junior employee, when your manager is walking by you 10 times a day and they just say, oh, they're checking in, and they're not micromanaging, but they're just kind of giving you a steer, there is absolutely no way you're getting 10 phone calls a day. Because lots of these little things that you learn, think about when you were a graduate, all the things you were taught in the first 5 or 7 years, how are you going to get taught them if it's on one team call once a day in a group dynamic rather than all this one-on-one? So I would say for most people, we need to go back to work a lot more than we think in the short term, only because we've spent 2 years not meeting anyone. It makes sense to rebalance it, and then we work out whether it's 2 days, 3 days. And one of my favorites is Wednesdays plus one, which is teams go, everybody has to come in on a Wednesday and then one other day, because there's no point half your team coming in on Tuesday, the other half Wednesday. All that's going to happen is, why am I sitting in the office still on Zoom calls to somebody else? And that's where people are getting to. Because this area of communication is going to become critical in organizations, because we're not going to be able to have these sort of town hall meetings in work where you get everybody in work. And communication is one of the areas that we're really struggling with. We all know that lovely feeling you get when you're chatting to someone, they're like, yep, yep, yep. Phone snubbing, or fubbing as it's called. It's that lovely same feeling you get when you're chatting to someone on their phone and you can hear them typing away in the keyboard. You really feel that they're listening to you. There's that whole story that you're trying to give people all these directions and these strategic imperatives and what they need to do for their business, and then you realize what you might be saying, they may not be hearing. You might be talking about growing your business twice the size. They might just be hearing, oh my God, it's going to be so busy. There's going to be so much work to do. I hate my job. That's not what your message was, but that's what they might have heard. And the head of Southwest Airlines said, you've got to have a few simple messages. So one of his key ones was, we're a low-cost airline. Once you understand that about us, you can make it almost any decision you want about this organization. So he said, real clarity is key. And you can have clarity, but you have to think about it. For anyone who remembers the movie Aliens, they pitched their movie in 3 words. 3 words. Jaws in space. That was it. And they got the gig. Sounds good to me. But the apocryphal story, the man who brings a woman out to lunch speaks for about an hour about himself. And at the end of the hour, the woman finally interrupts him and says, why are you telling me all this? And he goes, because I want to get to know you better. And this is a challenge. We think we're listening when we're actually talking. And even when we're trying to listen, we're listening to respond as opposed to listen to understand. When you have people who you're dealing with one-on-one, we often go straight into a conversation because we've got 6 one-on-ones to do, and we don't start the conversation by going, how are you? Because what's the problem with how are you? 99% of Irish people are going to go fine or grand. You might need to say on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm not feeling great at the moment, probably about a 4, where are you? And you're much more likely to get a number that gives you a conversation, because fine or grand doesn't take you anywhere. Because all these digital rules we're going to have around communication. Is it okay to WhatsApp people on weekend? Can people just book up your diary? Of course we're going to have to work weekends sometimes, because sometimes we're busy. But the problem at the moment is we've very few of these rules, so people are never off their screen. And Eric Dewan's written an amazing book around this, where she says that some of the lack of connectivity is really struggling with communication. So if I know my boss and I've written a pitch for something new, I want to run a new business, or I want to have a business plan, and I send it to them, I've put a lot of work into it, and they just respond, and I know they're kind of busy, and they just respond, fine. I'm going, yes, great, and I go ahead. If I've never met this boss over the last 2 years, apart from online, they go, fine. Fine could sound like, fine. What, is there something wrong? It was just one word, they didn't even respond properly. Is there an issue here? And because I then don't meet this person over the next couple of weeks or months in the office, that starts to fester. And you may think this isn't an issue, but she actually highlighted some of the key little phrases that people say in email that really, really annoy their staff. So simple things like, I'll take it from here. What do people hear? You're incompetent. I'm taking over. Gentle reminder, you've forgotten, you idiot. Gentle reminder, gentle, we have to be so careful with you, gentle. And we all do it. Why don't we just say reminder? Please let me know if I misunderstood. Everybody knows. We both know you've misunderstood. Even things like, as per my last email. How passive-aggressive is that? You obviously ignored my last email, so I'll send it again. But I'm just being clear, you did get this already from me. And even thanks in advance, we should think, what's wrong with that? Well, you have no choice. I expect it to be done. I've asked you to do something, and I've thanked in advance, but I haven't even said I was going to do it yet. But here's the key. When it comes to email, what are we doing? We're in the playground. We're in the coffee shop. We're in the morning. Answer, 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 answer. And what we are not doing is thinking of the quality response to the other person. What we're thinking about is speed of response, and therefore we have spelling errors, one-line responses. But the moment you stop and go, maybe I should go, dear Peter, thanks very much for emailing. You go, oh, I don't have time for that. Yeah, but maybe the other person would appreciate that. But we're going for efficiency because of all these things about hustle culture. We got to be faster, faster, faster. But remember, this is downstream thinking, and we're not thinking about the bigger things. You want to hire good talent and retain good talent, you need to make sure they get a nice experience from you when they ask you for something. And on top of that communication, we've got this whole Zoom fatigue. And anyone who tells me for the next 10 years they can work from a screen 5 days a week and never have to come into the office, I'm going to tell you, you definitely won't have a job. Because one of our key skills that we have that computers don't is this human skill. You know the whole feeling of rapport, mirror neurons fire, our breath sinks, we have something called oxytocin goes through our body, and that essentially, from years of evolution, creates this idea called rapport. You can't get that through a screen. So what do? Do we blame the technology? No, we blame the other person. Oh, they didn't really get me. So you have to understand, I can sit in a meeting room and I can feel if somebody's angry with me, or I can feel if somebody's a bit embarrassed, but I can't tell you how I feel that, I just do. I can't do that over a screen. So we need to understand those people skills are going to be critical. Absolutely, we're going to have massive digital advantages, but we've got to connect the two together. And one of the biggest challenges I've heard from companies is not all these huge issues around the future of work, it's, oh yeah, biggest issue is still meetings. 1 hour meetings, too many people invited, the same 3 people do all the talking, no agenda in advance, everybody goes on mute, and the moment they go on mute, they just start working on something else. Like, you don't all have to. Try and have a meeting once and tell people not to go on mute. I'm telling you, not everyone has a dog barking or has roadworks going out outside. Because the moment you tell people they can't go on mute, they go, oh, I've actually got to sit and listen. Oh, Jesus, I wish I hadn't come to this meeting. Because that's what people are often thinking. And here's the problem. When these meetings, Zoom meetings are quite good, in-person meetings are quite good, hybrid meetings are a nightmare. Because suddenly you've got 2 different audiences. And this is going to be a real challenge. We've even found some companies are doing training on people because people are shouting more at their screens than they ever did to their phone. Now, what's going to happen in an office where you got 6 people on 6 different Teams calls, all in different pods? Can you be quiet? You be quiet. And this is what's happening because we're not used to this. And Sadal Neely has said that if you're going to have a lot more remote work and a lot more remote meetings, which in the future we will absolutely have, you need to change the meetings dynamics. So for instance, simple things like, you can't just send an agenda, you need to send it a document. You need to ask people, so if you want to have a debate about an issue, there's no point saying, what do we think about this? Because you can't have a good debate in a Zoom meeting because people are on mute and they're interrupting each other and you can't have these side conversations. So what you do is you send it a shared document, you get everybody to give you your thoughts. Then you get the introverts, you get the extroverts, you also get considered thought because people have a bit of time. Then you share all that information with people at the meeting. So then people have got all the thoughts and then you can have a conversation. The idea of coming to a Zoom hybrid meeting and just trying to bring a big topic together and get everyone to talk about it, what's going to happen? The same 3 people are going to do all the talking. Then in this meeting, you can use shared documents, you can use polls, you can use word clouds, so you can use some of the benefits of online meetings. So we have to understand, she uses the phrase, prepare alone and then end together. So don't come to the meeting and then start the meeting. That's not going to work. And as a leader of any of these meetings, you've got to arrive early. The other challenge people have is people arriving late to meetings. You should just stop people arriving late. Because arriving late is the unwritten rule. I'm just so busy. I have so many meetings on. I have to arrive late. And go, you need to turn around and go, clearly you've got a time management issue and send them a time management course. They won't enjoy that because they'll go, you're missing the point about why I'm being late. So communication is tricky. This is social distancing in China. We all know it can be done a little bit nicer when you look at how it's done in Paris. But it just takes a little bit more thought. And we can even use a bit of humor. We've really missed humor. I went in and tried this. Come in and try the worst coffee one woman in TripAdvisor had in her life. Now that is great. Now that is superb. You're going to try that. Or a friend of mine sent me a link from Helsinki. He went to Helsinki in November. And he goes to the airport and he goes, nobody in their right mind would come to Helsinki in November, except you badass. Welcome. People are at the airport going, yeah, I am a badass. Damn right. But the point is, it just gives you that lovely feeling right at the start. So then when it comes to talent attraction, we'll hear a lot about the Great Resignation. And one of the biggest reasons for this is people are sitting at home, they're realizing, what's the thing I'm missing most? I'm just working. And they realize maybe their work isn't just tasks, there was a lot of other things. It was meeting people, it was chatting. It's no fun. Ryanair a number of years ago started to become a nicer airline. It wasn't because of their customers, it was because of their staff. Nobody wanted to be going to a dinner party going, where'd you work, Ryanair? Let me tell you a story about Ryanair. It's like, no, not another one. And while most people in the room are probably in the HR talent community, it's often your line managers who really don't get talent attraction. They don't realize that, their LinkedIn profiles still look something like this, and they're expecting people to want to hire them. We need to do better than this. But we need to also understand that a lot of your hiring might now be online, and people aren't considering how they look online. I still see people where most of the screen is blank and their head is down at the bottom, or you can hardly see their face, or the Wi-Fi is out. I've seen a photographer saying you can look like this, or you can look like that. And he said that takes about 10 minutes of work. But if you think about the top left, how would you hire an IT person if your Wi-Fi isn't great? You've already given them a feeling that maybe this isn't a company for them. And then we've heard this phrase, people are our greatest asset. And of course, everybody believes this, but the real question is, do companies behave every day as people are its greatest asset? That's a harder one. And Seth Godin says this best, we're no longer hiring people. Hiring is just letting the people know you're accepting opportunities of a job. The reality is we're recruiting, which is the act of finding the best person, persuading them to stop what they're doing and come and join you. That's a very different thing. One is just a process. Recruiting, though, is artful, and it's essentially a direct marketing effort. So if you don't have the whole firm involved in this, and you are trying to do it on your own, it's not going to work, because this is a lot more about brand. It's why years ago Harvard was saying we need to be more like marketing, and certainly HR and marketing need to be closer together. Even things like job descriptions need to be thought about from a digital point of view. And a number of years ago, I saw Johnny Campbell, I'm sure many of you know, said our job descriptions should look like this, because this is what we like, and this is what they look like, the bottom side. Think about that. How boring they are. This kind of phrase you get where the person on the left is 16 or the person on the right is 40. Just think about the difference in how they use their phone. What are they going to read that you're going to post? They're going way too quickly. Okay, so to capture their attention, you're going to have to be very, very careful, because when you do, you're going to have to think about simple things. Like we kind of say talent is really different, and then I look at people's job specs, and every single job spec, regardless of the job, starts to say, wait, this is who our company is, this is what we do, Maybe if you're maybe if you're hiring an IT person, just start with how great your technology is. Think about what a technology person wants from a job, from a salesperson to a marketer to a finance person. Maybe ask the people in your team, what would be the best opening paragraph in your job? And then hire a wordsmith communicator to change it for you. That would take almost no time at all, but you would completely transform your jobs. Make them a third the size they are now, especially given every time everyone should go on after this and just apply for a job on their phone from their own company. And after 10 clicks going, my God, this is impossible, you'll realize that's the experience you're giving your candidates. And then obviously we need to get better at using programmatic job boards. These all take work because we have to actually learn how to use them, and it's more challenging. We have to start looking at AI and all the different technologies out there which are impossible to keep up with. And that's why you probably need to be looking at podcasts and listening and finding out from experts what's going on at the moment. Because a challenge if you work in the HR industry, I've always seen, is we don't, when you look at it, get the same respect you often get if you've got a finance person or a legal person or a tech person, because they're kind of seen as industry experts. The problem is everybody thinks they're a people expert. So to differentiate yourself, you're going to have to know a lot of stuff that no one else knows. You're going to have to be more of an industry expert. You're going to have to know more about the gig economy. People are now hiring things like head of remote working for their organization because they realize the challenge with relationships. And the gig economy can be huge. This is Khadija Niazi, who 5 years ago was at the Davos Summit. She took the Stanford Applied Physics exams. They put their whole course online. They put the exam online. She took it along with 20,000 other people. She came first in the world, age 11, based in Pakistan, doing the whole thing in a dial-up connection. So clearly, there's brilliant people out there. And clearly, we are able to work with people anywhere around the world, but we have to think about it. And Richard Baldwin says, if you think about exponential growth in technology, guess what? 1 billion people speak English as a first language. The way Google Translate's going, within 5 to 10 years, maybe not even that long, everyone will speak English as a first language. So you've got a huge population out there. And we also have to think about the type of people we're hiring. I would highlight these useless liberal arts educations that people talk about are probably the most important, because you know what? The hardest course I ever did was the humanities, because he asked me what I thought, not what I did. We have all the information. We need people who ask questions. And the final thing around this is the whole area of references. which a number of years ago, a social media company rang me up and asked me for reference, and I said, of course, and they said, it'll take 15 minutes. Oh my God, 15 minutes. After 10 minutes of them answering mundane questions, and honestly, they weren't even listening to the answer themselves, we finally got to the end, and I was a bit pissed off at this stage, and they said, would you rehire this person? So I said, actually, no. And they said, oh, that's a bit of a problem. And I said, why? Oh, that really needs to be a yes. So I said, would you like me to say yes? And they went, oh my God, that'd be so helpful. That is how references are being taken right now. The only person in your organization who should take a reference is the person who's going to have the person report into them, because they're the only person who cares. If you think about how this works, this is a policy. We've already gone through 4 interviews. The last thing we need is them to screw up the reference, because then we'd have to find somebody else. So let's hire this person regardless. Don't have a reference process. Find a terrible hire in your organization and then go and find me the reference afterwards. Okay? Just scrap them. The amount of time you're spending on them as well. And by the way, every time you get a call from somebody with those, your brand reputation goes down. It's like you're asking me to fill out a form on a reference, so you don't even want to speak to me. Think about that. And then when it comes to retaining your talent, clearly we've got people now kind of just trying to go back to throwing barbecues. And I say to people, well, how do we recognize people? And people say, well, we couldn't really do that over COVID. And I said, could you not? I said, well, you know, we just said goodbye to them over Zoom. And I said, well, could you not have, if they'd been with you for 10 years, could you not have rung lots of their friends, got some information about how they did well, funny things that happened to them, and then present that all back to them in a really nice Zoom call? And I said, well, we could have done that. That doesn't cost any money, it's just thought. So the point is, if you're good at recognizing and retaining staff before the pandemic, you'll continue to be so because you'll have a thoughtful person. But the key is going to be this whole idea of presenteeism. You know, I love the story of the locksmith who, when he started being a locksmith, it took him half an hour to open the job, sweating profusely. By the end, he could open any lock in 30 seconds. But the problem was, when he became an expert, people used to go, really? $80 for that? But it only took you 30 seconds. And that's the problem. We unfortunately like to see the hard work and sweat. It used to be the person in the car park at 6 in the morning, the lights in the office at 9 at night. Nowadays, it's people sending emails at 1 in the morning or 2 on the Sunday afternoon. That's what your employees are going to hate more than anything else. They want you to trust them and realize I can just do a good day's job. I don't need to be seen it. But the problem with professional service organizations is it's often very difficult to measure how hard you work. So what do? We become busy, because busy becomes working hard. So we never stop working. The other thing your staff are going to want is talent recruitment, talent learning, talent development. I was chatting to Colin earlier. It's not just about training, it's about development. Using tools to do that, not just the tools we've used before. You're also going to realize more your staff are going to be lonely, and they're not going to tell you, because that's not something you say to your manager. They're working from home more, their colleagues are working from home more, their clients are working from home more. And blaming millennials, I would not be doing that, because 25 years ago I didn't have a mobile phone or a laptop. I finished work on a Friday, and I didn't think about it again till a Monday. Maybe sometimes not even Tuesday. But anyway, But that's the difference. And that's led to this last area called burnout. And you know this picture here, this picture doesn't move, but actually the argument goes, if you see it moving, it means your brain is kind of flying at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you should probably do a bit of mindfulness. So I'll let you, while you're thinking about that, I'll just play a quick video.
Really? It's time for a phone to save us from our phones. New Windows Phone, designed to get you in and out and back to life.
That was a big lie, wasn't it? That was about 10 years ago. We're going to give you phones that'll stop you being on your phones. But this is the problem. We now have issues. And people have said, but Peter, you know, it's just a tool. A phone's just a tool like a bike. No, your bike hasn't sent you 3 pictures while you're in today. It says, look at me, I'm on my own. Here's 3 lovely paths we could go on together today. No, your bike just sits there. Your phone does not have the same objectives you have. Its number one goal is to get you back on the phone. And however hard you're trying to get off it, there's 10,000 people in Silicon Valley doing everything they can to get you back on it. But on top of that, this 2 years of working from home meant we've lost this decompression time, the time when we left work and we came home. And that 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour, we kind of went from one to another. And now we're literally putting down a laptop, walking downstairs, Dad, what's for dinner? And we're not getting that decompression time. And we're continually connected to our phones. We blame our kids, when the reality is they've learned it all from us. We've even got people taking pictures of people on their phones, but taking the phone out of the camera shot just to see what people look like when the camera is not in the phone, and it starts to look a bit depressing. We even have people saying technology is the answer to a question we never asked. You can get books where you can record your voice into the book so you never have to be there. Wonderful, terrible. The kid knows the story of Little Red Riding Hood. What they're looking for is somebody to be there. You can even get a selfie toaster. We can get your picture. And while most of you are going, it's crazy, I see two people going, yep, that's my brother-in-law's birthday sorted next year. But it comes down to this phrase, continuous partial attention. We're constantly doing two things. Cognitively, we can only do one thing at once, so we keep switching between two things at once. And then when you look at your younger staff, their laptop might be beside their TV, or actually quite soon their TV is their laptop, and therefore even when they're at work, they're not at work, and they're staring at the same screen at night that they're staring at the day. So how is their brain focusing? So we end up with this over-caffeinated, under-inspired worker. Hands up how many people here don't have their phone by their bed at night. Come on, can we get more than 10? 1, 2, most people just looking crazy and asking, how do you wake up in the morning? The same way you used to wake up. But this is where you get your best ideas. Everybody says it, driving, in the shower, walking, lying down. No one ever says sitting at their desk. And even at their desk, very few people are looking up. We don't have time to look up. Remember, downstream, we're too busy. The wheel was around for millions of years, suitcases, hundreds, but it was only in 1972 before somebody put them together. So, looking up isn't the worst thing in the world. So to conclude, don't worry about what your future office looks like. Look at what your future technology or your future culture is going to look like, the culture of your employees. And while there's lots of technology out there that will help you, these are not the answers. The answer is firstly, understand your employees and what they want. Because you've got 5 generations in the workforce, they're all people. They all want respect, they all want communication, they all want empathy. And what they certainly don't want is surveillance. So be very careful about any tools you put in that you call productivity tools, because people are going to see through them. And if you want to be trusted, you're going to have to be honest with them. You're going to have to tell them we don't have all the answers, because you shouldn't have all the answers. The next year is about experimentation. But you do know that you want to mine this more than anything before. And for people here who go, Peter, I know a lot of these things. I go, you might know them, but what are you doing differently? We knew 20 years ago that nobody looks up here, but we're still doing it. So it's not what you know, it's with the information you know, what are you doing differently? And we saw that in Sweet Valley, California, where a few years ago, as a rescue farm, they lost all their business because nobody could go. So they set up a company called Goat to Meeting, where you could hire out their goat or their alpaca onto their Zoom calls. And guess what? It was always 5 o'clock somewhere around the world. And they ended up making more money from this through a camera and a Wi-Fi than they ever did from the rescue farm. So if a farm can pivot to digital, maybe it shouldn't be that big a challenge for the rest of us. And a story I tell a lot, but I love, is the story of Joshy the teddy bear. It's my last story. Lost by a 4-year-old boy. And he was really worried about it. Parents rang the Ritz-Carlton. They said, don't worry, we have the teddy bear. Pick it up on your return. That should have been the end of the story. But the employee realized that a 4-year-old losing a teddy bear is a really big deal. So he sent a few pictures of the teddy bear having his own holiday. One having a beach, one getting a lovely massage. And the reality is these pictures went all around the world. They went viral all over Twitter. But they didn't do it because of Twitter, and they didn't do it because of technology. They did it for 2 reasons. One, the employee put themselves into the customer's shoes and thought, what would they want? And more importantly, they put in discretionary work. And if you have employees like that, you'll have absolutely no problem with the future of work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Peter. A couple of things that I noted during that I think really struck home with me is culture is what happens when the boss leaves the room. So there's a lot of culture going on now while you're all here. Change has never been so fast and will never be so slow again. But, and just to your point there about who sleeps with the phone, as in beside the bed, I should say, is 37% of people don't have a clear start and finish to the end of their day. I'm one of them. I'm certainly one of them, but I don't want my staff to be. And that's certainly something that I want to take away. You said not everything that counts can be counted. I really liked what you said there also about meetings. You said prepare alone and end together. And I've tweeted a range of these as I was going along, because I want to make sure that I can think about them afterwards. And you also mentioned, I posed a very interesting question. Do companies behave every day as though people are their best asset? And I think that would take a long time to answer. Love the dairy milk job description idea, actually, because I have to write one myself later on today. So might just get a dairy milk, in fact, for inspiration as well. Only because you said so, Peter. And also another point here you mentioned a lot, which is trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. A very, very interesting point there as well. So lots for us there to take and to run with, and that's exactly what we're going to do now as I invite the panel to come onto the stage. While I'm doing that, Aaron, would you mind just putting back up Mentimeter there? So one question. Over 2/3 of you said that one of your challenges is recruiting at the moment. Can we just ask, so if you are seeking new talent currently, where are you looking? Where exactly are you looking? So this is just a question that I want to put to everybody. So exactly where are you looking? So far you say Irish Jobs, LinkedIn, Jobsy, you said online. Okay, so LinkedIn there is, and also of course if anybody has forgotten the code or anything, it's up there at the top. So go to menti.com, use the code 56005419. You said advertisement, LinkedIn, Indeed, third party, referrals, LinkedIn, recruiters. Okay, so let's just see what else is coming up there now. So thank you. International countries, overseas agencies, networking, LinkedIn, jobs.ie, Indeed, referrals, LinkedIn and Monster online, Glassdoor, referrals, Irish Jobs, company website online. Interesting, actually, this is the first time I've seen company website twice. First time own, okay, now they're all coming. Okay, agencies, LinkedIn. Okay, just gives you a sense. I've been at a range of things over the past while where somebody mentioned that we're all looking in the same place for talent. And how do we look where talent is hiding? And I think that is going to be among the questions that I'm going to pose to the people that I'm now going to bring up on stage. So can I ask Kathleen from Ringers, if I could ask you, Kathleen, to please join us here on stage. Lynn McCormack, also here from FRS Recruitment, and also Dennis Curran from the IDA. So can I ask you all to put your hands together, please, for my panel? To get us started, Dennis, if you'd like to take your seat up here. So, what I'm just going to start off with each of you. Lynn, I'm going to start with you, as we've heard from Peter. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? Kathleen, I'll go to you next, and then Dennis.
Yeah, so I'm Lynn McCormack. I'm General Manager with FRS Recruitment. And I think the topic of talent attraction is really key. Obviously, in recruitment, we're living and breathing it every day, and we're sitting across a number of different sectors in terms of IT, engineering, healthcare, finance, and lots more in between. So we're really seeing the impact. We talk to hundreds of employers every day, and we're seeing the impact that it's having in terms of talent attraction and the lack of it with businesses right across Ireland. And I think, we've kind of touched on it there with Peter. We're in a really unique situation at the moment where the candidates hold a lot of the power. So understanding the candidates and actually what their motivators are is crucial right now. And as Colin mentioned earlier, we actually have our annual Insights report being released this week. So I'm hoping to get to share some of those insights with you today.
Great, thank you very much indeed, Lynn. So, Kathleen, as we move on to you here, particularly Lynn was saying there's to talent attraction, a lot of activity going on. It's really understanding their motivators and what's driving them. What is it? Could you tell us about the nature of what you do and actually how it ties into that?
Yeah. Oop. Okay, that works. So I'm Kathleen. My background is in advertising. So I've been in the industry for about 15 years. I'm currently with Ringers. We work with FRS and some of the lovely work you'll see later today. So Ringers as an organisation, what we try to do, we're kind of different, I suppose, than your normal advertising agency. It's a group of kind of creative thinkers from multiple disciplines. And what we do is work with clients to try and solve those, what we call proper problems. Problem is a kind of a persistent problem within your company. What we always say is it's like, when you get a bag of pistachios and there's always that one or two at the bottom that you just can't open, and you're trying to get it open and it takes lots of kind of skill, keeps you up at night kind of. But basically what we do is work collaboratively with organizations to solve those problems. So sometimes it's an advertising campaign, sometimes it's an internal program, sometimes it's design, it's service, it's product. So I think, for us, it's trying to identify those problems. What we do, and I think this taps into Lynn's piece as well, is for us, really the core starting point is absolutely getting under the skin of the brand, trying to understand that brand and what's that unique, kind of thing the brand stands for, but then it's also the audience, right? So it's not just enough to understand the brand, who you are and what you stand for, but it's how you actually fit in. What's that sweet spot whereby you reach what your audience actually needs? So yeah, so that's pretty much what we do. So it can be a campaign, which you'll see later on, but sometimes it is, just kind of an outreach or a different product. Yeah.
So Kathleen, you say persistent problems and creative thinkers underscore what you do. Dennis, IDA, we're all quite familiar with the nature of the work that IDA does, but what do you do in particular?
Yeah, so good morning everybody, and it's great to be here. So my name is Dennis Kern and I head up Regional Development, Property and Enterprise Development for IDA. In January of last year, we launched our 4-year strategy, and we've a target of 800 FDI investments to secure by the end of December 2024, and our target is to secure 400 of those investments in regional locations across the country. So myself and my team are working on those 400 investments and trying to secure them across regions. And while a company or an investor, when they're carrying out due diligence on any country or location, much of that due diligence and analysis and criteria they look at is unique to the project that they're working on or the company or the sector that they're from. I think the one uniform thing that they always ask us about is, can we get the talent, and can we get the talent, in the region? So that's why I'm here today, and look forward to the discussion this morning.
800 investments by the end of 2024, and 50% of those to be in the regions. Okay, that really does set the scene for where we're going to go today. Before I start my own questions here with the panel, I just want to remind you I've now moved the slide on Mentimeter to the questions area. So if you want to submit your questions, please do. But also you can see what people are submitting and you can upvote them. I'm seeing everything here as it's coming through, and I'm moderating them as well. So just want to point that out, that that's available to you. And of course, you can also tweet #HomeTruths at FRS Recruitment. Dennis, can I start with you, and I'll go back down through the panel then. When you talk about the questions that are relating to talent and attracting talent, of course, there has to be people to take up those opportunities. An opportunity and choice might be two words that could characterise the labour market at the moment. What are the conversations that's happening at maybe board meetings at San Francisco or Shanghai or Berlin or wherever it might be around the world as they consider coming here to Ireland and offering that choice and opportunity?
Yeah, so when we're talking, like if I look at foreign direct investment and the nature of the geography of it, like there is a degree of urban centricity to it. Investors like scale, they take comfort in scale. And when I talk about scale, the scale of the demographic reach of where they locate, the scale of the infrastructure where they locate, the scale and capability of the educational infrastructure that they can tap into. And when we're talking about regional locations, like if we look at Ireland, if I look at an investor in Shanghai or New York and they look at Europe and they see Ireland, 0.9% of the population of Europe, they need to go underneath that particular stat and data point and say, well, look, how can we scale scale up our operations and attract the talent that we're looking to attract within a defined period of time. If they say they want to get to 300 people within 18, 24, 36 months, etc. So we need to help them answer that question. And in answering that question from a regional perspective, and we're trying to secure investment across all the regions of Ireland, we have to broaden the discussion about how they can tap into talent, not just tap into talent here in Ireland, but tap into talent across the EU and tap into Irish talent globally. And, it was interesting to listen to Colin talk about the relationship with GA Go. You look at every angle possible about being able to attract world-class talent into the country. And a lot of that world-class talent that's abroad is Irish. And what we need to do is, not alone do we need to put a value proposition in front of a client company about why they should come to Ireland and why they should come to a region within Ireland, but coterminous with that, we need to be able to convince Irish people abroad that if they return to Ireland, that not only do they have a job here, but they have a career here, and not just for them, because usually they're bringing a family with them, and that they have career opportunities, for their families as well. So look, there's two different sales messages there that we're going out with. And what I would say at the moment, the IDA portfolio, we've 1,700 companies in the IDA portfolio employing over 257,000 people directly. 55% of those jobs are now located and distributed across regional Ireland, across over 700 companies. And what I would say is the choice that is available to the Irish diaspora abroad, I don't think it's been ever been greater, both in terms of the diversity of sectors and companies that are locating in the regions, from life sciences to financial services to technology companies, but also on the geography of jobs, in that a lot of these companies are now not just located in the urban centres within regional locations, but they're also located in provincial towns, from Letterkenny to Castlebar, to Galway, Limerick, Shannon, Tralee, Cork, etc. We have IDA client companies in every county and every region, and if we're there talking and trying to tap in, to use Míle Mar Hertig, to tap into the heartstrings of people, we also can provide them with a degree of comfort and reassurance that they can build a long-term sustainable career in Ireland as well, with world-class companies.
Kathleen, what Dennis says there is that you're not just bringing people back for a career, you're bringing families home for a lifestyle. And can I ask you maybe then to pick up on that, given that the hashtag today is Home Truths, we're going to see more about that later on, but how does Home Truths differentiate from the 70 minutes of home and, the heartstring pulling there of Míle Mar Hertig?
You're going to love our campaign. You'll get to see it later, but first of all, just to say, but I think for us, when we started, and Colin kind of referenced it before, like, the partnership with GAGO was the perfect partnership to reach the audience that we needed to. We knew that 17.5% of adult Irish people were abroad, right? And that's the largest, proportion within the OECD. So there was that pool of talent there. And the partnership with GAGO allowed us to absolutely tap into them directly. And I think for us too, it's a brilliant moment. It's at whatever time it is in your time zone, it's a really emotive thing you're connecting to as well, in terms of watching, your home, your national sport, and potentially your home county as well in that sport. So we knew that was the right channel to reach the audience there. For us as well, what was really important, as Colin said, we kind of started planning in January 2020, and it was really clear what both the FRS can do, but also GAGO, was bringing you closer to home, right? FRS with its expertise in terms of not just job placements, but also relocation. So all those tricky problems that you have. Let's say when I left, I'm actually originally from New York. When I left New York, I was leaving school. But now if I was to return, I have to think about where I'd send my kids to school. So it's a very different proposition, and we have experts there that have that experience and that can talk to you and help you through that process. But also GAGO in terms of what they're delivering to you, and that's home in 70 minutes, a really intense, hopefully exciting 70 minutes. So for us, we knew that was the proposition. We started working, and then all of a sudden in March, the world was a completely different world. So we had to acknowledge the cultural kind of insight that was there. Uncertainty absolutely abounded. Flights were grounded. You couldn't actually get home if you wanted to get home for a visit, let alone to relocate. I think as well, just with that, initially our objective was, okay, we are using this as a lead generator, so we're going in and we're really going to drive leads. Whereas what we realized was actually we have to take a step back. All we can do right now is plant seeds. And just in talking to our audience, really define that actually now was a time where they were more homesick than they ever were before. And they couldn't get home. And when you can't have something, you want it that much more. So we use 70 minutes of home very much to give them that experience. We use slow TV techniques, really immersive kind of 70-minute film to give you Kerry, so Dingle, watching cows go up and down, all the sounds. Same with Galway, same with Croke Park as well. So to be able to give that, we couldn't necessarily get them back home, but we could at least give them that little taste of home, and then as well tell them this is how we could help down the line. Whereas now, with Home Truths, we're in a different, again, culturally we're different, but our audience is very different too. So culturally, we can come back home. There is more certainty still. There's question marks, but there's a bit more certainty than there was. So for now, very much the people that were dreaming about returning home one day are a little bit further along in the process. because now maybe they want to and they're ready to, they're outside of the dreaming, and now they're actually thinking about practically, how can we get home? We're ready to get home. So that's, you'll see Home Truths, a little bit of a difference in terms of tone. It's still very much from the same proposition, but it's what we can offer, those abroad. It's what they need, and that's help and advice in terms of how to get back. So that's how the platform evolved. It's the same platform, but it recognizes culture is different, but our audience is different too, and what they need and are looking for is different. And so therefore we tailored that message to them. So we've had a lot of success with the first campaign, and as we launch this one, we hope the same. Yeah.
And Lynn, I'm going to pick up on something there that Kathleen said. By the way, there's a lot of questions coming in here on my screen, and there's a lot of them, Lynn, around bringing people home is wonderful, but what about housing shortages or, a variety of other elements? You can all see what people are saying there on it, as you'll see, and how people are voting them as well. But Lynn, can I ask you, you're talking to candidates every day. What are they saying about what's underpinning their choice of where fundamentally they go?
Yeah, I suppose, Susan, it's a bit of a strange one at the moment, where there is that disconnect really in how the candidates are feeling and their outlook in terms of kind of possibly what's happening or coming down the tracks in the wider economy. The economists are predicting a cool down, a significant cool down is coming, but we've seen very clearly through the results of the survey that there's a really strong positive outlook coming from the candidates, where we had 3 out of 5 of the candidates said they feel there'll be more job opportunities for them this year. And also, if they were securing employment, that they think they would do that much faster this year than previous years. So it's really kind of interesting to see where their mindset is at compared to previous years. And I think it seems to be the common thread throughout today. It's opportunity and choice. And they're really kind of understand that and maximising that at the moment. But also as well, and I'm sure a lot of people here in the room will feel that it's putting pressure on salaries for employers at the moment as well, because a really high number said that they are expecting a pay rise this year. So, as much as the talent attraction piece and the hiring demands, obviously it's going to feed into the retention piece as well, because it's putting big pressure on salaries. But we still have movement, even though it's tough at the moment, because there's that positive outlook. There still is movement in the market.
Okay. That point continues to be upvoted, and Dennis, I might come back to you too, because obviously you're having that conversation also. Peter, the second most upvoted question is at the beginning. It says to Peter, so you're leaving me under no illusion who you want me to ask. So, to Peter, what advice would you give to hiring managers and companies to provide the time and space for employees to do discretionary, more thoughtful work and not focusing employees' time on completing tasks? So that whole Google, I'm guessing, I'm paraphrasing on behalf of the audience here, but the whole Google idea of that there's X% of your time spent on other tasks, and that's where Gmail came out of, for example.
Yeah. I think the starting point is to realise that most of us during the pandemic felt very guilty that we weren't doing enough, so we ended up working longer hours. Then the second thing that happened is we're not very good at realising that when we were in the workplace and we stopped by somebody and had a coffee and chatted them for 10 minutes, that was work. We were in work, we were chatting to somebody. Now we're at home, that 10 minutes might be going outside into the sunshine for 10 minutes, and then or picking up your kid, but going to the park. But we feel a bit guilty when we do that. We go, I'm not really working. So then we go back and we work longer hours. So the starting point is, this is only going to work if it starts with the leadership and they say, look, we don't want you to work these longer hours. And most companies I'm talking to are saying, I'm really worried. I don't mind working long hours, but I hate the fact that I see all my staff doing it the whole time. So it's something that you're going to have to do over a lot of people are putting in kind of digital detox programs to tell them what to do. But the key is it has to be a practice and not a policy, I said earlier. I've seen people saying things like, tech firms saying we offer unlimited holidays. Any company I know that offer unlimited holidays, people take less holidays, which is crazy because no one else is taking the holidays. And then almost the unwritten rule is, well, the more holidays you take, clearly you're not very important to the organization. And then bizarrely, they actually make money out of it because you don't have any holidays to carry because there is no holiday amount. So the company ends up making more money from it as well. So all of these practices that you have as an organization, just challenge them. When you have these practices like, you might send an email tonight, but I won't look at it tomorrow morning. And then people respond straight away. So get rid of these things that you think are working until you actually see they're working. And if the leadership of your business aren't going to do these things, why would the rest of the staff do them? Because that's where they take their lead. So I think it's going to have to start with the leadership.
So do what I say, not as I do.
yeah.
Ultimately that can be a big challenge. A lot of questions come in here about retention, and I'm certainly will take care of them, but to our next panel, because that's the whole focus there. Lynn, I'm going to go to you next on another question that has come in here, which is, as we all know, the market is scarce at the moment. Candidates hold the cards in their hands, and that ties in exactly what you said. On that, what do you believe is the biggest challenge is in attracting candidates? And maybe, Lynn, in the context of that, could you talk about that, about the short-term trends and how we might look forward over the next couple of months? That mismatch you spoke about, the expectation, the pay rise, the idea that you can secure a job faster. Could we just hear a little bit more around that in the context of what this question says?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, look, it's really all about understanding the candidates. It's a moment in time that we're in right now. It's a complete flux, but it's understanding what their priorities are, what's important to them. And I think, people have definitely taken stock over the last couple of years to evaluate what is actually important to them. And, what we've seen is the trends, again, through the Insights report. Pay came out on top, even significantly more than our last report. But there's other trends emerging and priorities that are just as strong. Work-life balance was up there, career progression, culture, values, and all of the benefits that go with that. But I think while they have this positive outlook and pay is top priority, if they're going to move, it seems the trend is they want a financial step up. And that is one of the reasons for the movement. But interestingly, if we were to flash back to 2009, when we first done this survey, job security was top, not surprisingly, post the recession. But if that uncertainty continues to creep in, within the market, and people start to get nervous, start to sit tight, it'll be interesting to see next time round, will those priorities change? Because it's really about, like Kathleen, you touched on it, it's feeling, it's emotion, it's sentiment about how things are happening, and people's priorities will change. But at the moment, I think the work-life balance and these other key areas are coming up just as strong.
Work-life balance, culture, values, positive outlook, but want a financial step up, and potentially, as if uncertainty continues to grow, job stability as well.
Yeah.
Kathleen, this question keeps coming in again and again. How do you convince the Irish to return for career and lifestyle opportunities when accommodation and the cost of living is such an issue at present? It's coming in different guises and it's being upvoted. And you've told us the answer, how to attract people home from the point of view of 70 Minutes of Home and Home Truths. Are there other campaigns you've worked on where, as you mentioned about, you're a firm of creative thinkers, where you've had to apply creative solutions to this type of an issue?
Yeah. I think actually kind of first and foremost, just with, to directly respond to that question, for us, as well, what we kind of... sorry, actually, can you just repeat the last bit? Because I kind of went to that, but then you asked me a different question just in terms of...
I did. Good value for that to say. So how do you convince the Irish to return for career and lifestyle opportunities when accommodation and cost of living is such an issue?
Perfect. Sorry, thank you. Because that was, for us, really very much key to our approach, right? Okay, so when you're abroad, I think, you can read the newspapers and they are screaming housing shortage, and there's lots of, you don't necessarily, the good headlines don't travel as far as the bad ones or the negative ones, but at the same time as well, you have your family and your friends that are just telling you everything's great, just come home, just come home, and they really are interested in getting you home, and the news media as well is interested in coverage, right, and kind of bad news. What we saw was that what FRS can do is they give you that impartial advice, okay? So, you have kind of rose-tinted on one side and you have kind of extremist, alarming, scary at times, on the other side. That actually what people need is that impartiality, it is to be able to explain, okay, because, a lot of times what you left is not necessarily what you're coming back to. So when we talk or look at the different regions, so you've been in Australia with coffee culture, well, Kildare has amazing coffee culture now as well that you mightn't have tapped into. But I do think, with housing shortages, there are absolute kind of negativity within that. But it's trying to get that impartial perspective and point of view to help guide you, through those and answer those questions more directly and impartially and kind of accurately. So that would be
Kildare and Melbourne, huh?
Yeah.
There we go.
Telling you now, Salon's really good coffee.
There we go. Well, keeping with it with an international theme, one of the most highly upvoted questions here, Dennis, is clearly aimed at you, and that is, what locations do you see as huge growth areas for talent around Ireland and abroad? So what locations do you see as huge growth areas for talent around Ireland and abroad?
as in business sectors and employment opportunities?
I am gathering that, yes.
Yeah. So if I look at the portfolio that we have, the 257,000 people are employed in those 1,700 companies. The two areas that probably grew fastest over the last 24 months have been the areas of life sciences and tech. And last year, we secured as a country 249 FDI investments, and 53% of them went into regional locations, and ICT and tech and life sciences would have driven those, followed by financial services as well. And while we're talking about remote working and hybrid working and working from home, etc., I think one key nuance on the life sciences side is that of the 55% of the people working in FDI companies in the regions, around 65% of them are working in manufacturing environments, where obviously remote working and hybrid working is obviously limited given the nature of the work that they do. So that is one area where we say around process engineering, chemical engineering, software quality assurance, FDA regulation around manufacturing environments, because a lot of the life sciences and medical devices companies that are here in the manufacturing activities are FDA regulated. So that's a very, very strong area at the moment. And some of that is directly related to COVID, because a lot of the ingredients and a lot of the end product that went into some of the healthcare solutions around therapies around COVID, Ireland played a key critical role in terms of global supply chains and being able to supply the globe some of those therapies and therapeutics around those particular areas. So they were a key enabler of those global supply chains. So that's on the healthcare life sciences side. The other side is tech. And again, not unrelated to COVID, we all moved to this digitized world even pre-COVID, but it definitely expedited in its deployment, both from our personal lives, but also our professional lives. So a lot of the cloud solutions and the technology that enables us to do what we want to do in remote environments, a lot of the companies that are driving that globally have significant operations here. So again, they were part of the implementing the technology platforms that allowed digitization to happen at the speed and the depth and breadth that it did over the last two years. So I think our life sciences portfolio grew around 4.1% last year, and our tech portfolio grew around 8%. Then in terms of the geography of that, we divide the country into 8 regions based on an EU NUTS classification, and each region across the country experienced employment growth last year. The Midlands, in terms of net employment growth by 10%, the Southeast by 8%, and a number of regions grew by 3%. So not alone just nationally did we see employment growth across the FDI portfolio, but also we've seen it regionally as well.
Well, that really does answer the question rather comprehensively, and I'll summarise what I've learned from you all just before we stop for coffee. But before I do, in 30 seconds each, could I just ask for one tangible takeaway from each of you that the audience can take and run with? Lynn, I'm going to start with you. Kate, I'll go to you. Peter, I'll go to you. And Dennis, I'll finish with you.
I have 2, but I'll try and put them
in
one really quickly.
I take great value for money women up here all together.
I think, can be creative with your talent attraction techniques. Lots of companies are trying different things. Continue to do that, but don't underestimate the value of the hiring process itself. That's your window into your organisation. So as early as possible in that stage that the candidate gets a positive interaction, they understand you, your organisation, what you stand for, it leaves a really long-lasting impression. We hear that from candidates all the time. Oh, and if that's not demanding enough, you need to do that really quickly, because if you don't, they're gone.
In utter contrast to Peter's story about the reference idea there. Okay, Kathleen, your tangible takeaway.
Yeah, so for me, I suppose it would be really to understand your audience beyond a demographic. So who you're looking to attract, and really getting under the skin and understanding them and what they need, right? Because to me, you'll understand then where you need to give them the message, but also what the message needs to be, because it's where you and your brand, or your organization overlaps with what they need. So it's that finding that sweet spot and being able to communicate that directly, just to attract the talent that you're hoping for. But it's beyond a demographic; it's more in mind state. Yeah.
More in mind state. Okay, Peter.
I'd say when it comes to recruitment, look at every single touch point when you're dealing with a candidate. Like, what does the line manager look like when he's at interview? How many different ways are you doing it? What's your job process? Like, every single touch point. And I'd say use recruitment agencies more. I'm not in one, but I'm telling you, the amount of HR people says, oh, we don't need to use them, we have an in-house team. They're free, and they are better than most people in-house because they're independent. And some candidates will never come to you directly because they're with a competitor and they will want to go through a third party. So there's no downside. You don't pay anything. And if you're really going to be serious about it, and if you're really looking for a candidate, pay some of them a retainer. Because I can guarantee any recruiter who's ever got a retainer is panicking, and they work for you constantly because they've already been paid a bit of money up front. So if you really want it, pay them a bit and then make them work for you ahead of everybody else.
Right.
There's a few of them in the room today.
A good point there. Good point there indeed, Peter. And Dennis, we'll finish with you on this one. The tangible takeaway.
Yeah, look, in terms of from a national perspective and trying to get global talent and the world's best talent to come here, especially Irish people to come back, I would just focus in geography of choice and geography of opportunity. I think with the geographic distribution of companies across the country and tapping into that work-life balance, that it's never been a better time to come back and pursue a career across all the regions of Ireland within your chosen field, be it, if you're a chemist, technologist, if you're a linguist, if you're in the financial services industry, just the variety and depth of choice at the moment, is plentiful out there at the moment.
Okay, so variety and choice, understand your audience really well. People are expecting a financial pay rise, but also positivity, work-life balance, etc. And also, one of the key things, Peter, many of which you've said, is practice versus policy. That's what matters. So on that note, I'm now going to say we're now going to stop for a coffee break for 15 minutes. After that, we're going to move into the second part of the day, which is focusing on retention, culture, performance, etc. We're going to have Professor Ian Robertson to start that session off, and then I have another action-packed panel. Keep tweeting, keep talking, and we'll see you in 15 minutes. I had a quick chat with Lynn over the break. Loads of you sent in some really practical questions around attracting and handling the recruitment process and the hiring process more broadly. So I am definitely going to hand those over to Lynn, and then Lynn, you're going to take care of them and do some sort of follow-up. I'll leave that to Lynn, but I just want to let you know that just because we didn't get to answer the questions on the panel doesn't mean that they're lost. I am going to hand them over to Lynn, and she will be taking care of them from there. Last thing is the hashtag Home Truths means obviously an awful lot of things to a lot of people. You're going to hear more about the campaign later on. I think Peter did a super job earlier of sharing some home truths around the workplace. But what the team would love, if you would, is also to interact with the hashtag and share some home truths about Ireland on Twitter, so that people who are engaging with the campaign, from the 90,000 in Australia that Colin mentioned, to the 70% of people. I was struck by that statistic from Kathleen. 70% of Irish adults live abroad, ultimately, and the highest in the OECD area. Did I get that number right, Kathleen? 17. That's why I was struck by it. I said, where are we all? Okay, 17. 17% of Irish. Thank you. It's good to do a fact check. For all of those people who are abroad, it is important, as Kathleen said, is that we don't have both sides of extremes of whether it's negativity or overly endearingly positivity either, that there are some home truths. So if you could share some home truths on the hashtag, that would be really brilliant. And we're all behind it as well, so we will make sure to interact with you. Now that I've all of that taken care of, I now want to introduce to you Professor Ian Robertson, a man that many of you will be very familiar with, whether it's through the media, traditional or otherwise, and often talks about areas that are very, very close to our hearts and minds, underpinned by psychology. I had the pleasure of speaking with Ian just before he came on stage here, and he's an extremely practical, focused man who's going to bring a lot of value to our conference today. So can I ask you all to put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to Professor Ian Robertson.
Thank you very much, Susan. It's a privilege to be talking to you all here today. As a blow into Ireland 23 years ago, I'm really struck by the resilience of this country and by the collective confidence of the country. And I'm totally delighted that my family is growing up here. Change is inevitable and change is exponential. Because of Moore's law, Moore's law means the power of a transistor, or as it used to be, doubles every couple of years. It means that technological change will drive the social change. That means we're all familiar with Zoom that we never heard of 5 years ago. It's going to get worse or better, depending on how you respond to my talk today. Because change means it's difficult to predict the future, and that's anxiety arousing for human beings, because we work as prediction machines. That's how our brains work. And when we can't predict, we're very likely to, not inevitably, I hope after today again, to get anxious. Now, if you buy Excel for your computer, there are courses you can go on, there are handbooks, workbooks you can buy how to operate this system. But there is another piece of software which is widely available in the world, which is about 1 billion times more complex than Excel, and for which no training courses and no workbooks is supplied with it. And that's the human brain, the software of the human brain. You have between your ears the most complex entity in the known universe, and yet there is no operating manual for it. So I'm going to try and give you some of the beginnings of an Excel workbook for your brain today. And I'm going to talk about a 4-legged chair that is essential for you, for your teams, for your companies, and for your families, and for the future of this complex species that we are. Because if we don't learn to feel more in control of this incredible machine we have between our ears, we're going to see a mushrooming of the kind of problems that we already see, problems of anxiety, problems of social conflict, etc. We have to learn to understand our own brains. So what's my 4-legged chair? There's 4 legs. One is managing stress. Second, building confidence. Third is handling power and dominance in relationships. And fourthly is to do with values. So the way I'm going to structure this talk, I don't have any slides. I'm going to structure this talk with called Triple E. I'm going to try and give you an experience that's personally relevant to you, that you do in your own head. I'm going to try and explain what's going on in your brain and your mind after that. And then I'm going to try and give you an exercise, a specific tip that you can take away. So let's start with stress. So how many of you can anticipate a stressful situation? Needn't be at work, it could be at home or in the neighborhood. How many of you can anticipate a stressful situation that you'll be in the next month? Could you put up your hand if you can envisage that? Yeah, I've got a very stressful one coming up next week in San Francisco that actually, the moment I think about it and say that, I get a little twist in my stomach. So I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to try and get into that situation to the extent you feel it in your body, okay? That you feel the heart, the stomach. So close your eyes. I'm going to do it as well, this difficult meeting I have next week. Maybe feel your breathing getting a little faster. For me, it's always my stomach that gets this. It's the first indicator that I'm feeling a bit stressed. Okay. So now, Some of you will have managed to get into that state, others not. Now I'd like you to keep your eyes closed, and I want you to breathe in to the count of 4 and out to the count of 6, to your own pace. Breathe in to 4 and out to 6. Do that again. Into 4 and out to 6, slowing your breathing a little if you can. And do it one more time. Breathe into 4 and out to 6. Okay. Now I feel a lot better or different having done that compared to before. I know some of you, or many of you, do as well. So what's happened here? Well, you have just changed the chemistry of your brain more fundamentally and accurately and in a more targeted fashion than any pharmaceutical your doctor could give you, could do. How? Well, there's a little part of your brain called the locus coeruleus. It's deep in the middle of your brain. It's the only source of the brain's adrenaline, which is called noradrenaline. And that's part of the fight or flight system. So whenever you're feeling challenged, stressed, wired, it's because there's a lot of noradrenaline flowing around your brain. Now, the wonderful news about the locus coeruleus is it's very, very sensitive to how much carbon dioxide is in your blood at any one moment. And the way you breathe directly affects how much noradrenaline is swirling about in your brain at any moment. The trouble is, when we're pressured or stressed, just before that difficult conversation we have to have, we tend to breathe faster, more shallowly. Some of us even, I include myself here, hold our breath unconsciously. That increases the carbon dioxide levels, increases the noradrenaline, and increases these symptoms of fight or flight. So here's the first little hack, the first little tip for this user manual for your brain, is to learn to use your breath to control your critical aspect of your brain chemistry. An aspect of your brain chemistry that pharmaceutical companies, so many of which are represented in Ireland now, are spending billions every year trying to control. But you have it as this first tip for you, not just for you, for your son or daughter getting anxious about their leaving cert or getting anxious about stress with friends at school. You can learn to control, to some extent, a critical aspect of your anxiety, your stress, and therefore your ability to think clearly by controlling your breath. Now, you might say, well, that's cool, I do that. Why don't I just do that? Well, here's the rub. That stressful situation that you've just been imagining that you're going to be in the next month, you'll forget what I said. You won't remember that you were here and about the breathing because we're driven by habit. And when we're in a stressful situation, all our attention is on the situation itself. And we don't remember these things that we've heard or read. So here's my tip for you. And I'd really recommend that all of you try and do this. Practice that breathing that we just did 70 times over the next 2 weeks. How do you remember to do that? Well, just try and get in the habit of every time you change task, between finishing that email and getting up to make the cup of coffee, between making that phone call and packing up to go home, take 20 or 30 seconds to do that breathing exercise. If you do that, by the time you've done it 70 times, the research shows that doing something 60, 70, 80 times makes it a habit. And that means when you're in that stressful situation in 2 weeks' time or next week, it's more likely to come to mind and you will do it. Now here's the second. I want you to go back into that stressful situation now, okay? I want you to close your eyes and back into that same stressful situation, okay? Let's just do that. I'm thinking of that guy I have to deal with next week,
Okay, let's tell you a little story. I was in a senior management position in a university. I don't think I was very good at it, but you do in academia. You do this for 3 years and then you step back. And I had a terrible, difficult HR situation that I wasn't trained to deal with, and I had a few meetings with this person and hadn't performed well at all in my estimate. I'd lost my cool. This person was very good at pressing my buttons and was provocative in my view. So I was very concerned and worried about this forthcoming meeting, my stressful situation next week. To the point I was waking up at 6 a.m, and mind racing, saying, how am I going to solve this problem? And it was annoying me. It was making me anxious. It was difficult to get out of my mind over a couple of weeks leading up to this meeting. Until one morning, I woke up and thought, hold on a minute. Actually, I don't think I can solve this problem in the external world, given what I know about the situation and the person. So my goal for this meeting next week is going to change completely. And my goal became not to solve the problem in the external world, but my goal became to change my own mind and brain in a way that I performed coolly and zen-like in face of provocation. Now that's not, you can say that, but that doesn't mean you can do it. So what did I do? Well, in your mind, the capacity of the human brain is so amazing, you can rehearse things in your imagination. And if you rehearse them accurately so that it's like real life, you can actually change habits and behaviors over time. So I have imagined myself going into the meeting. I imagined the anxiety, felt the anxiety. I imagined the things that would be said. And then I imagined myself responding differently to how I would tend to respond, which was responding in kind to provocation. Very hard for a hot-tempered Scotsman to do this. But it was a real goal for myself, a real personal challenge, to the extent that just before the meeting, I felt excited. I felt, can I do it? It was a bit like an Olympic, can I break the record? And I went in, and the meeting went in exactly as I had feared it would, except that I behaved with coolness. I didn't rise to the provocation. I was incredibly professional, like most of you in this room are able to do it, but I haven't had that. I've been able to do that until very late in life. And I came out of that meeting with the problem in the external world unchanged, unsolved, but with me feeling like $1 million. Why? Because I'd achieved a goal. I'd changed the rules of the game, and I'd achieved a goal that I'd set for myself. And achieving that goal lifted my mood because I changed a different part of my brain chemistry. You've all have heard of the dopamine system of the brain, the system that's hijacked by drugs like cocaine. Well, you can control that part of your brain as well by the nature of the goals you set for yourself. So that's my second hack for you, my second takeaway tip. It's about reframing a stressful situation from one of threat and the dread that goes with it to one of challenge and the opportunity to perform. I promise you it works. So can I just get you now to close your eyes, go back into that stressful situation in your own mind and see if you can reframe it in that way. Did anyone manage to do that just a tiny bit? Could you put up your hand if you did? Okay, good. Well done. Because sometimes it's hard to do that. That's 2 tips for you. 1, the breathing habit, 70 times. Secondly, learn to try and take control of stressful situations by defining the goal for yourself. And the goal sometimes has to be an internal one and not an external one. Okay, next Triple E cycle. I want you now to think of a time in your past when you've been facing up to a situation where you said to yourself, I can do that, in spite of the uncertainty, in spite of the anxiety, that you did something. Okay? Try and think of a time where you look back with that sense of kind of slight pride. You know, I wasn't sure, but I said to myself, I can do that. Just think if you can think of that. Okay, now think of the other situation where there was an opportunity to do something where wasn't 100% certain you could, and where there was anxiety, but where you refused the fence, you pulled back, you didn't do it. Think of that situation where you retreated. So how do you feel after these 2 different situations? I know that when I'm thinking of this, I feel like I did after the difficult interview. I felt a sense of achievement, of success. After the other one, I sent a sense of the opposite. And that does reflected in my brain chemistry, because what we're talking about now is confidence. And for the women in this room compared to the men, on average, that's a big issue. It's a big issue for all of us, but for women compared to men, the research shows it's a particularly big problem. Not problem, opportunity. Because confidence, let me just explain what it is. Confidence is not optimism. Optimism is the belief that things will turn out. Nor is it self-esteem. Self-esteem is our evaluation of ourselves. Confidence, its secret sauce, is its link to action. It is the belief that you can do a particular thing. So it's not a general belief about yourself in all realms. You can be confident socially, but not academically, and vice versa. So there are domains of action in which you can feel confident. So confidence is a belief that you can do something, and that if you do it, a certain outcome will follow, will happen. And here's the incredible fact about confidence. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Why? Because confidence is treated by the brain as a goal achieved. I think I can do that. I can do that. Well, your brain registers that belief that you can do it as having done it, and gives a little burst of that dopamine activity in the brain's reward network. And that is a mini antidepressant. It's a mini anti-anxiety drug. And it's a mini motivator. Finally, it's an action impeller. Because of these 3 things, the antidepressant, lifted mood, the anti-anxiety, the reduced anxiety, and the increased motivation, you're more likely to do the thing. You do the thing in spite of the anxiety, and that gives you a self-reinforcing cycle of further increased dopamine activity, lifted mood, and that is what confidence is. That is what success is. That is, success is the greatest source of success. It multiplies exponentially like technological change. So, Marissa Mayer, who was the former chief executive, one of the very first women to be head of a major tech company, she says, success, and this is also true of confidence, success is about doing things before you feel quite ready. Tiger Woods said, the day I'm not nervous when I go out on the course is the day I give up. What that tells you is that actually anxiety and uncertainty can be your friends in these stressful situations you've all been thinking about. Why? Because if you do the thing, if you take the action in spite of the anxiety, that is one of the greatest sources of confidence. If you do it easily without anxiety, you will get less of that boost, that antidepressant, motivating anti-anxiety boost of your reward network. So anxiety is your friend. Why? Because it also shapes the way your brain is working. And many of the brain's chemical messenger systems have this bell-shaped curve where too little and your brain doesn't work very well, and too much and your brain doesn't work very well. And there's a sweet spot in the middle. And the three things we've been talking about today help pull your brain back from too much of this noradrenaline to the sweet spot where your brain actually performs better. So not only are you more likely to do the thing, but you're going to do it better because, and more likely to be successful, because your brain has just the right amount of noradrenaline and just the right amount of dopamine. You're at your sweet spot. And so you will be more fluent in the words you say. You will be more measured in your response to an angry conversation. You will be more able to see the wood for the trees and solving the problem you're trying to deal with. And this can be true in work or families or neighborhoods. So I'd like you to just, in this exercise, just close your eyes, go back to that stressful situation and see if you can get into that Tiger Woods frame of mind. I can do this. Okay? It's a repeat, partial repeat of the previous exercise, but now with this added confidence. How long do I have, Susan?
Sorry, I was in the zone there. You're breaking me up, but you have 6 minutes.
6 minutes, great. Okay. So that's confidence. Let me just summarize takeaways about how to become more confident in a specific domain, because confidence is a set of habits of thinking, habits of behaving, and habits of emotions, and all habits can be changed. You can learn to be more confident. So remember the great, well, you don't remember him, he's been dead for 800 years, but the great Afghanistani Persian poet Rumi said, the road only appears with the first step. That's why confidence is so critical, because it makes you more likely to take action. And when you take action, even if you're not sure, like Marissa Mayer, that you're quite ready or you quite know where it's going, the mere act of taking action takes you to a different place where sometimes the path emerges. Bite back seeking reassurance. If you're in the habit of saying, oh, what I'm going to say, it's probably rubbish what I'm going to say, but, or, oh, don't listen to me, but. Habits of seeking reassurance reduce anxiety in the long term, in the short term, but sap your confidence in the longer term. And they sap other people's confidence in you. So bite back the reassurance seeking things. Posture. the old kind of idea, the research that suggested you could stand, the bold pose, that hasn't panned out research-wise. But what has panned out is that when we're in situations where we feel, if you like, lower status or anxious, we tend to make ourselves smaller. That actually subtracts from our feelings of confidence and our performance. So fake it. Stand tall, not in an exaggerated way. Hold yourself tall. Don't prevent yourself going into this pose, and speak loud and clear. Don't let your voice do your body's submissive posture. Don't be frightened of anxiety. Treat anxiety as your friend, as an opportunity for you to become more confident. Believe that you can change. Don't think that your abilities and your personality and your emotions are predetermined by some genetic or other factors. They're not. The human brain is incredibly plastic, and you can change and you can learn. And the greatest enemy of that change and learning is the fatalistic belief that your attributes are, if you like, set in stone. Beware of saboteurs at home, in friends, in work, people who for various reasons want to undercut your confidence. And then there's values, which I'm going to come to in a moment. Okay, I'm just going to finish off now with power and dominance relationships, and then values. So we are a group species. And that's the secret of our success, is our ability to work together in groups. All groups have dominance hierarchies. They just emerge. You can see that in any school playground, any workplace. So now we have to think about how do we, if we work in groups, how do we make the groups as smart as possible? How do we get the most out of our teams? Well, we might say we want to recruit talent that's really, really clever. And yes, we do. We want high IQ, talented people like you're all recruiting. But here's the interesting truth, that the ability of a small group or team to solve an IQ type problem is not correlated with the individual IQs of the people in that group, at least within this audience here of clever people. In this group here, the ability of any one group of you to solve a problem won't be correlated with the individual IQs of the people in your group. Why? Well, what does determine the smartness of a group? What determines it is three things. This is research at Carnegie Mellon University. First is how equal the time spent talking is in the group. So the group's trying to solve the problem. If you just measure roughly how much time, how equally distributed the speaking time is as the groups try and solve the problems. The second thing is the average ability of the members of the group to read other people's emotional expressions, facial expressions. And the third thing is the proportion of women in the group. But that third factor is accounted for entirely by women's higher average ability to read other people's emotional expressions. So why does this happen? Well, the power of a number of brains networked together must always be greater than that of any one brain. So what we're essentially looking here is the architecture, the IT architecture of networking brains together. And it's very hard to network brains if someone is insensitive to someone else looking bored or annoyed or wanting to speak, or if someone is speaking so much that other people are feeling inhibited, because when someone speaks a lot, particularly in a loud voice, it's more often males than females, but I have many exceptions to that. That speaking a lot and loudly is a dominant signal that will tend to inhibit other people in the group. So if you want to, you can make your team smarter, you can make them more intelligent, to the extent that you focus on these non-IQ related social relationship type factors. And that is absolutely critical. And that's why that's why Alec Ferguson in Man U got rid of Beckham, he got rid of Keane, he got rid of anyone who threatened his dominance in the team because he wasn't the one out playing. But once you get someone who's becomes too powerful within the group, you diminish the group intelligence of the team. So finally, values. We all from time to time feel slighted, humiliated. As catty comment that's made that we want to respond to. A lot of organizations have terrible problems, particularly I have to say some of the NGOs that over the years, some of the terrible, but you also get it in departments of government, etc., where egos try and protect themselves. People start to bend the whole organization to the task of defending their amour propre, their ego. So one of the greatest antidotes to this is affirming your values. It's called self-affirmation. So I was going to do a little exercise to and we'll maybe finish off with that. I'm just going to give you an example of some common values. And I want you to kind of go through them and think, what are the ones that are really important to me? Okay, this is an exercise in self-affirmation. So, friendship, competence, easy life, creativity, love, honesty, toughness, kindness, freedom, intellect. There's many others. But what are your core values for you? And if you ever feel slighted or feel diminished, the evidence or threatened in some way ego-wise, if you just take a couple of minutes to write down what your core values are and then rehearse in your own mind why you have these values and what they mean to you. If I was to put you into an MRI brain imager, you could see reduced emotional activity in the amygdala and a change to the frontal lobe's activity in thinking about yourself. Affirming your values is one of the greatest ego protectors because our self-esteem is basically about our values. That's the ground rock of it. If we remember these values, then the failing to get that job, being put down in that meeting, the sting is taken out of it because our values are eternal. And so it gives us a sense of solidity and it reduces the vulnerability of our ego. And that's why in organizations and companies, I was fascinated by the presentations earlier today just about really getting under the skin of organizations. And under the skin is the values. And the values of the leaders in particular that can be read so easily by people, by what they do rather than what they say. And to the extent that a company or a person or a team member feels that their leader is espousing and acting the values that are important to them, you will get trust, you will get amazing team players, you will get fantastic talent exploitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that, Ian. And if you might just take a seat there, I just would like to put some questions here to you. So again, Menti is where people have been sending everything in. You can upvote, you can send in your own, and there certainly are some things that have come in here. First and foremost, I suppose like everything else this morning, I took a lot out of that, Ian. I took, breathe in for 4 and out for 6. See, we were spot on in terms of time, weren't we? Breathing in for 4 and then out for 6. And actually, that something as simple as that, which is totally within one's control, doesn't take time and can be habitual, can be more effective, as you said, than any drug that can be taken. You also were talking, and that's what some of the questions have come in actually about my second point, your second point, about the problem in the external world was unchanged, but the internal reframing changed everything. You have some great points here. Success is the greatest source of success. It's doing things before you're ready, and even saying that anxiety can be your friend. Also, the quote you mentioned: "The road only appears after the first step." And you didn't just point out what to do, but what to avoid, like biting back the hunger for reassurance, and also you mentioned about holding your posture and speaking with confidence. And then, of course, the composition of the groups and the values as well. So what I'm just going to do, I'm going to start off here with the question that was upvoted most clearly on the minds of many, which is, how can we deal with stress that is not originating internally, but may be caused by others and their behaviours?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we are a group species, and the greatest source of stress is the fear of the negative evaluation of other people, and also the behaviour of other people, which is difficult to control. So it is a truism to say, but it's nevertheless true, that you have to identify the areas in which you have some control and the areas in which you don't. And you have to avoid letting the wheels spin on the mud of your mind, trying to deal with a situation that you don't have control over. And a terrible, horrible example of that is a family member or a friend who's in addiction, say in alcoholism. The stress that can come from trying to change that, when sometimes the solution is to say, well, that person has to find their own path here and face up to the consequences, and I'm going to have to protect myself. And that's just an extreme example, but there are many other situations. Like this, the one I gave was the behavior of a person in my team that was stressing me, and actually, subsequently, it was clear that this wasn't my fault. It was a feature of that person's behavior. But I couldn't solve it. But by changing the goal to one of my own performance, if you like, emotional performance, that really took the sting out of that stress. So if someone else is doing something that's causing you stress, it's a question of you being creative and saying, well, how can I insulate myself by setting goals that help me preserve a certain amount of control, and not be completely at the mercy of that person's behaviour.
And how do you let go, Ian? How do you let go of the sting, as you say? That's something you've said a couple of times, taking the sting out of something, whether it's letting go of that sense of needing to control that family member in addiction, or needing to be the one to dominate the outcome of a situation. How do you let go?
It's not easy to let go, and this is where accepting, just saying to yourself, the words you say to yourself are so important. The words you say to yourself, saying, you know what, I can't deal with this. You talk to self-talk you can look a bit mad talking to yourself, but actually self-talk is an incredibly important way of making otherwise vague thoughts explicit to yourself. And sometimes just saying words to yourself, I can't deal with this, I'm going to have to step away from this. Or that's one. Just say it out loud to yourself. Diary it. Writing it down is even more helpful, if you like, of helping you gain a certain detachment from these situations. The other thing is to realize you are not your anxiety. Your anxiety, if you can learn to be detached from your anxiety, to watch yourself being anxious, to watch yourself, oh yeah, you're feeling pretty miserable today. Oh, there's the symptoms. Again, language and self-talk are incredibly important, useful here sometimes. By getting that detachment from your emotions, that actually takes some of the sting out of them. And the third thing is action. Stressful situations, difficult relationships. If you just focus on a task, a job, I'm going to get that done, that focuses your attention on a goal. And once your attention is focused on a goal and you're in the moment, that means your attention is not free to go walk about to all the what ifs and the what might happens.
I have 3 more questions and I have 3 minutes. So let's see how we get on here between the hot-tempered Scotsman and the fast-talking Cork woman. So, number one, do we not need that element of stress to perform at your best?
Yes.
Well, that's our set, right?
Yes. So remember, stress is a perception. Anxiety, and the perception is that the demands made on you exceed your ability to cope with them. So in that sense, we don't need stress, but we do need anxiety. Tiger Woods needs a bit of anxiety, needs that edginess to perform well. And yes, to get to your sweet spot, if you treat anxiety, and call it stress if you like, if you treat it as a form of energy that can be harnessed, then yes, you do need it.
The second one is, if you are very confident, very talkative, friendly, sometimes dominant, how do you pull back, be reserved, and change this habit that is preventing you sometimes to listen more to others?
Probably do some mindfulness training, get an app, do some mindfulness training. I mean, I'm seriously about that, because these things can be a compulsive habit. I mean, males, well-educated males like me, we have privilege, and I've many times dominated, and I have to pull myself back. I have to recognize to myself that I'm inhibiting, and so self-awareness can be built by just learning to do a little bit of meditation. You get these wonderful apps to do this, many different types. Really recommend that.
Even the self-awareness in the first place, starting there.
Yeah.
And then there's, okay, now this is like watching a horse race, because now one has been upvoted more than the other. Has Ian any thoughts on how business leaders can manage imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome is healthy.
There's many would disagree with you on that.
Confidence is a two-edged sword. We all need to be a little bit more confident than reality dictates. Confidence is a stance to the future. It's the stance that Ireland took in the big recession and said, we can do this. And because you can have collective confidence, which is even more powerful than individual confidence. It's almost an existential stance to the future. I can do this. And you have to learn to realize that, yes, you cannot be certain about the future. You cannot be certain you can do this, but you need that kind of edge of doubt, if you like, to motivate you to do it. If you're overconfident, I mean, the chief executive of American Airlines said just before COVID, there's no way that airlines cannot continue to make increasing profits, and there's nothing can change this. And 3 months later, the COVID brought the airline industry to his knees, and he was going to federal government looking for huge inputs. That was overconfidence, and many industries suffer from that. So you need, if you don't have a bit of doubt, it means you're not properly assessing risk. And so imposter syndrome needs to be handled like anxiety. There
is one more, and I'm just going to ask you this because it just ties exactly into this. Is a culture of overconfidence better or worse than underconfidence?
We all need a little bit of overconfidence gets us up in the morning. You would not start your own business if you were 100% realistic.
I did it 10 years ago, and I'm wondering.
Because most businesses fail. Okay, so it makes more sense to work for a company, a big company. So entrepreneurs like you, Susan, need this capacity to go out and believe that they can do it, and that's the human spirit. But it's within limits. It's within limits, and you have to beware of the boss who becomes gung-ho, who particularly beware of the boss for whom it becomes all about him or her. Look for the I's and the me's in the conversation rather than the we's and the us. Look for the self-reference, even if it's generous and funny and charismatic. Beware of that. Beware of that. Charismatic person who everyone loves and talks so much, and everyone's quiet and enjoying. Beware of that overconfident charisma.
Really, really interesting. Thank you very much indeed. And I think by virtue of not just the comments that have come in the questions, but the upvoting as well, I think people took an awful lot of that. So, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Ian Robertson.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And on that note, I'm now going to invite our next 4 people to join our panel. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on retention, culture, performance, etc. So first and foremost, you've all been here, you all heard about the scene that was set there through Professor Ian Robertson. In that context, can we start off? Brendan, I might start with you. Could you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Good afternoon. My name is Brendan McGinty. I'm managing partner of Stratus Consulting. And what we do is we provide strategic employment relations support to companies, mainly in the private sector, but also in the public sector. But we also do a lot of work in the employment policy space. So done a lot of work in this related area, particularly obviously now in the context of some legislative changes pending around remote work, access to flexible work and matters of that nature. But obviously in what is an incredibly challenging business context, but the work we do is mainly at C-suite level and with chief people officer level in supporting their change agenda.
Okay, supporting a change agenda. Well, you're certainly in the right place here this morning in order to talk about that. Shane, will you tell us a little bit about you?
Of course, good afternoon. So listening to Ian there was a privilege, first of all. So my background is in performance coaching. I work as a business coach with Inspiring Excellence. I was like 23 years of age. I was that green, overconfident young man who thought that he could run a business on his own. But luckily enough, I took the jump and evolved over time from a high-performance sporting organisation into looking at businesses and how you can develop leaders and high performance under stress. And the second piece of that is I work with teams, working from where the current reality is to become a high-performing team in SLT groups throughout Ireland, obviously the world with the advance of COVID and the online structures. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shane. And Dr. Bryan?
So I'll use the mic. I am assistant professor in behavioural science in Dublin City University. My background is like psychology, technology and health, technology in the workplace. And more recently, I co-founder and CEO of a startup called Worky. It's a kind of employee insights, employee listening platform combining behavioural science, best practice in behavioural science, best practices in intervention science and data science. To capture what's going on for employees and raise kind of what we're looking at is trying to understand how people get on in the moment, surface issues if there are any issues, and surface successes if there are those successes. So that's my background.
Okay, that's great, Brian. Thank you. And Owen.
Hey, Susan. So Owen Lennon is my name, and I lead the motor and complex claims department for Liberty Insurance across Europe. So that's Ireland, Portugal, and Spain. So I lead a team of about 320 internally, and then we've just over 1,000 external vendors and stuff supporting the overall network. So my teams are in 3 countries, so I've got 3 languages, 3 cultures, lots of different systems. But I think the important thing for us, all aligned around one core goal and one key set of values.
Okay, great. Well, let's just get a sense of the values of the audience here for a moment. Can I ask Aaron there to just switch on Menti here for a moment, because I have one question and I'm just going to ask everybody to rank this one. So, right, here we go. So, while they are interlinked, so my question to you is rank the following in terms of how you're investing your time and your energy. Now, I didn't say money. I intentionally left that out. Your time and your energy. So what is taking up those non-financial resources? Is it retention, performance, or culture, and in what order? Okay, so 11 people. Okay, yeah. So these are changing rapidly. And Brendan, I'm going to go to you first to comment on this to see what your reaction is to that. First of all, it's quite tight. It's quite tight, and all 3 have moved around again and again as they're continuing to do. So it's looking like it's settling. No, it's not like what are you doing to me? Do you know?
It's a bit like watching the N3 Grand National.
That's what I mean. Yeah, that's it. Now I'm Susan Hayes Culleton, not Tracy Piggott here. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so right, we've 83 votes. I'm going to ask Aaron if you switch it back to the holding slide, and I'll move it on to Q&A. Performance, retention, and culture in that order. So Brendan, What do you say, particularly, let's say, we'll start off there with performance, and Shane, I'm going to go to you with that as well. So performance, what changes needs to be made to the managerial mindset, particularly relating to performance in the context of this new world of work?
Look, it's a really big question, but I might just focus on some of the kind of challenges that are kind of before every organisation at the moment, right? The attraction and retention challenge is obviously here and now. But as we see kind of the transition towards remote work and for a lot of organisations, hybrid now more practically, it's posing huge problems and challenges for management in terms of how to best assess performance, how to motivate teams in very diverse locations. It has huge implications for culture, because all of us who've been around a while have been used to working in organizations where, if you want to get the touch point of an organization, a leadership team, a chief executive, all he or she has to do is to walk the floor, talk to colleagues, engage informally. That's no longer available to leadership teams in the conventional sense of that, especially where you're dealing with people in very diverse locations, with very diverse constitution of teams. And if you build that out a little bit, if you think about where the experience everybody has had perhaps around remote work, and you think of the different perspectives people have to that, some terminology that Wharton University have used around this is where you have people who are integrators versus segmenters. So segmenters are people who, want their real clarity about their working life. They don't like the idea of sitting at the kitchen table. They want a separate space, an office, maybe away from family life. They do want to shut off in the evening at 5 o'clock or whatever it is. Integrators, however, are the total opposite of that. They have no problem doing the emails at 7 in the morning, dropping the kids to school, going for a walk at 12 o'clock, working in the evening, all of that. And they're quite happy to integrate every aspect of their life, and they don't have that same need for separation. But just think about that from a management challenge in terms of communicating goals, communicating objectives, evaluating performance, ensuring you get feedback, and the challenges that brings. And one of the things I think that managers are having to do in this space, particularly for organizations that rely on innovation and trying to build a high performance culture, is that because of the always on challenge that we all have, as we all know, we've had this issue now of overscheduling, right? Over the course of COVID, our diaries were chock full of Zoom calls or Teams calls every hour or half hour or whatever, with very little time to think. So organizations are having to really look critically at how it organizes its resources, how it actually implements these kind of frameworks around remote work and hybrid work, where increasingly, listening recently to the VP of HR for Microsoft, where a small thing, they will not schedule half-hour Teams calls for no more than 25 minutes to create physical breaks between calls. Organizations are creating space for people, whether it's a morning or an afternoon, not to have to deal with online meetings, so that they can actually have some time to think. And those are the sort of practical issues that managers are having to deal with in terms of building a performance culture, which they've totally had to reimagine. And that's particularly challenging, I think, for older managers who have really had to kind of embrace this in a way that they have never had to do before. And at the same time, people will have heard of this issue too about, for example, proximity bias, which is, look, if I'm in the office, right, and my manager needs something done, is he or she more likely to come and ask me to do it rather than Mary or John, who's part of the team, who's online? But if there's a crisis, whoever's next door is more likely to get called upon, and you have to think through the implication of that for the team dynamic. And again, those are challenges for managers in terms of the mindset about making sure you have an inclusive team, that people feel motivated and respected for the work that they do, even if it's in a remote location.
So, as I'm hearing you talk about the segmenter versus the integrator, that also, of course, has ramifications to the other point of view as well, and also the overscheduling and time to think. Any of you that were connected on LinkedIn, there's a good few there who I am. You'll know that in my January 2021 New Year's resolution was to take time out, take an hour to think every day. My 2015 and 2021 New Year's resolutions were the two most powerful ones I've ever picked. But anyway, that has been incredibly helpful, and I protect it sacrosanct because it is the most important hour of the day that I can spend. But I've had to defend it against attack for sure. Shane, as we listen to everything here that Brendan has spoken about, can I ask you a simple question? What takes a good team to being a high-performing team?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing I think is self-awareness from the concept of what is a high-performing team. So many organisations and teams, whether it's sporting or business, they don't have a fundamental awareness of what are the deep fundamental building blocks of that team. And one of the most important ones is personal relationships. Within good teams, people think that it's just business relationships, getting alongside the person that you know in the workplace and being a nice person. But with high-performing teams, there's a deeper level, a deeper connection. So they know exactly what that person's personal life and personal challenges are. So they're willing to connect on a more vulnerable basis and open up about their life, their challenges that we all deal with on a daily basis, and talk through it on a consistent basis. When you have that personal, deep personal connection beyond your business and to life and what the bigger picture is all about, well, then you're more willing to have those open conversations and to challenge each other in a positive way because you have that trust. So in my eyes, if you take that next level, it's nearly conflict. So in the highest performing teams that I've worked with, whether it's sport or whether it's in business, they have a willingness to be very, very direct and approach conflict and be radically open-minded about that other person's opinion and see, okay, what can I gain from this that allows this team to develop? And when you really connect on that basis and you challenge each other, then everybody's voice is heard because you trust each other, then you'll commit. Then the group will commit to what it is that you're trying to do. So again, whether that's success in a sports field or in a business environment. And within that commitment, high-performing teams have a bigger why. So a lot of us, if we reflect on the work that we do, and a lot of the organisations I've worked with, the biggest that, I suppose, unearthing or awareness that I've helped create or empower with the group is that we're actually doing something really valuable here. Valuable beyond ourselves, self-transcendence. So when you can connect to a bigger why, then you're more willing to really, really commit. And that commitment then would lead to each individual holding each other accountable. So the great teams or the good teams, it's the leader. He's driving everything or she's driving everything and they're holding the people accountable. But when the absolutely high-performing teams, it's the person alongside you. Why didn't you do that? Was there something on your mind? Is there a better way? What if you looked at it this way? And they're constantly interacting in that way every hour of the day, not every day, not every week, but every minute they get an opportunity. And ultimately then at the top, I think, what are results? So, I mean, high-performing teams, the result is very process-orientated. So it's what results can we really meet today? And the second part of that is, I think in high-performing teams, it's about the collective results. And there's no silos in the organisation or silos in the team, or it's not about ego. I think Ian referenced that. In the highest performing teams, it's pure humility. You know, we're doing this for a bigger cause, a bigger picture beyond ourselves. And they all help each other to be at their very, very best. So maybe a long-winded answer, but...
No, well, it's starting questions and upvotes, which I'll keep you in suspense, the rest of you can see what's coming in. But that's certainly, some people have some questions around that, all right. And interesting, even as you say, the absence of ego and the presence of humility is a big contrast there in between the two. Brian, from your point of view, what is your take on this theme broadly and the fact that performance was number one, retention number two, and then culture number three of what we ran there with everybody in the group?
Yeah, so I think, to be honest with you, I think they're all related, and I think the key thing is to understand people. So my background would be, it's behavioural science, and I've moved into technology and engagement, I suppose. I'm working with companies and I'm working with organisations. And on an individual basis, if I was to ask any of you a question that to say to you, and you said to me I was stressed or something like that, we would talk then a little bit further about, well, why are you stressed? And I would try to help you out. or if I was if I could help you out, I would try to do that. But at a macro level, that's not possible. But in the sense that in an organisation, you can't be there all the time for people, and there are certain things outside of your control. So the key thing is this. I think you're referring to it there, the high performing team, and earlier on about processes, not just processes and so forth, but bringing in practices. It's about building that rapport and trying to make that try to design rapport within a team that people feel really understood, they're listened to. If I asked any of you to go over, to go over and above the cause for anything with me, you'd have to know that the leader was going to do it, or the team was going to do it. There needs to be the values there, and so on. They all need to be aligned. And I think it's that listening piece is really important. How you listen, and then how you and delivering action on that. So in terms of retention, in terms of performance, and in terms of culture, they're all related. Like it's not just turn on and off a tap for one or the other. They're all intrinsically related. And your culture is a kind of a continuous thing that feeds down into performance and it feeds into retention. Why do people stay with you? Why will people drive on? It's for the reason that they believe in what's happening. They believe the leaders are listening, they believe the team members are listening, and they have a rapport with each other, and they have a mechanism, a democratic, let's say, mechanism to share their opinions in a kind of psychologically safe way.
But how can you show you're listening, Brian?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's down to, well, I mean, right now I'm responding to you. So,
thanks.
but that's a simple thing. But at a team level, it gets harder. And I think it's just, you can't win, you can't do everything for everyone all the time. And I've seen this now. I was thinking about Ian's talk about jumping in there, starting a company, and the foolhardiness of that. And I was thinking, geez, yeah, maybe you're right. But I can't do, when you're sitting down with teams, you can't do everything all the time. But what you can do is acknowledge. So the first thing is to acknowledge that people have said something to you, and to say, look, that's a situation that you're in, and I understand it. I'll do my best, to assist you with that, or to take that opinion on board. If it's a small team, you can do that. If it's at a bigger team, or you're a leader with 300 people, or whatever that case might be, you might need to use a system to allow you to do that, but to respond in time. Its first thing is acknowledgement, and then recognition that people have actually have come forward with an opinion. That's the key thing. And thereafter, you try to action it. Fundamentally, it's the action that drives kind of more people coming forward to speak.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, and that there's lots of practical elements there. Owen, if I could, I'm just going to go straight in with a question here from the audience. 14 people have upvoted this one. How transparent with your employees should you be with company objectives and future planning? And maybe you might answer that in the context, 15 people have now voted it. Could you answer that in the context of how you've arrived at how your hybrid working solution has worked out? So again, I'll just repeat this. 16 people have now voted it. How transparent with your employees should you be with company objectives and future planning?
I think, first of all, incredibly transparent is the answer. So maybe just to give you a bit of context of what our working model is and how we got to it in Liberty. So pre-pandemic, we had realised that if we want to keep attracting the top talent, we're going to have to look at our working models, we're going to have to look at our flexibility, and we're going to have to start changing. So we had trialled remote working in some teams, now not in our large operations teams, but in some teams, 1 day a week, that type of thing. And that was based on feedback from our internal teams. So really the pandemic just accelerated the journey we were already on. It wasn't, let's say, the catalyst for the journey. So where are we at now? Or how did we really come to it? After a few months working at home, it was evident that our teams were able to perform. Our teams were happier than they had been before, and we were surveying our teams every single month, taking the feedback through MPS and other means. And the teams had told us, 93% of people at that point said they did not want to go back to the old way of working. So we realized that we had to work with the teams to develop a working model that worked for all of us. So as I said, we were performing. In some instances, we were outperforming what we had been doing in the office. And the teams wanted something different. So we worked with the teams to develop our Liberty Digital way. And what that means today is, actually this is my first time outside of my home office in over 2 years. Not in its entirety, but in a work environment.
Welcome to the world.
So, yeah, thank you.
Here's what we look like.
So we work remotely predominantly. Our offices are back open, albeit only very recently, so people have the option to go into the office if they choose, up to 2 days a week. If we want people to be in the office, we'll give them plenty of notice to come in. And I think the important thing is it's not a carrot and stick model. So it's not a case of if you're performing well, you can work at home if that's what you want, and if you're not, you have to come into the office. Our working model is people work from home. So if we have performance issues, we performance manage people at home or remotely. So that's the model that we've arrived at now. It has obviously evolved and will continue to evolve over time. But just kind of coming to your point then about transparency and on objectives, one of the things we really had to do was work harder to make sure that the objectives for everyone are much, much clearer, that they are aligned with our company values, because that's what we're living by, and that essentially is our culture. And whether we're working remotely or in the office, our values haven't changed. Our means of actions that we do to try and achieve them absolutely have, but the core values haven't. So one of the really practical things actually that we did is all of our objectives are visible to everyone. So the CEO's objectives are visible. Anyone can go in and click on them. His key results become the objectives of the next level down. Their key results become the objectives of the next level down. So there's complete transparency. So we have regular feedback and communication all of the time with the teams about individual performance, team performance, department performance, and company performance, but also about our goals for the future. So everyone can understand what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, albeit a small task, a big task, how that impacts our overall company goals. And that has been, I think, one of the things that has really supported us in delivering a model that the teams want, that has that flexibility, but also maintaining the success that we've had throughout delivering that model and advancing that further.
It sounds like you need an awful lot of discipline to maintain that.
I think you need teamwork, and you need clarity about what your goals are. So, if you're in a time where you're not very, very clear what you're trying to achieve, well, if everyone's sitting in different locations and you don't have that open communication piece, that's going to be very, very difficult. But really, you need a lot of communication. And I think, one of the things when we look at our different teams, so most of our managers or leaders are people managers, right? That's what they do. They're working with people. But every so often, when you really take a step back and you look, how much time are you spending of your day actually focusing on developing people? And that gets scraped away at times because there's other things, there's projects and other things. So that's one thing that we have really focused on, which is empowering people in the teams. By empowering them, our people leaders have more time to do exactly that. And that has created much more cohesion, I suppose, across the group, much more clarity and a level of comfort. And what we don't have is people sitting at home or in remote locations wondering. And that would be, so I think communication.
Clarity and communication. Okay. Shane, I'm going to go to you on the next most... You're making my job very easy today. Fair play to you. All I have to do is read off what's here. And that is Shane won the All-Ireland club with Ballygunner this year. I was here, and I'll never forget that last couple of seconds in that match. And I wasn't here to watch that match. I was here to watch the one afterwards. It was incredible. It was out of this world. But you said... so, by the way, this was sent in anonymously by Colin. Just saying.
Hey.
All of you are voting it, you can see. So, so Colin asks if there was one non-negotiable value that they had as a group, what was it? And 14 other people want to know, apart from Colin, the anonymous submitter. One non-negotiable value.
That we had as a group?
That you had as a group, yes.
There's a few of them now, there was about 20 of them, but... I'd say, and it's very kind of, if I could break it down to what it looks like practically, but I'd say self-transcendence, and that's a big word. But it was like we were connected to a spirit that was beyond each individual player and the team. So we weren't coming up here to win the All-Ireland, but there was a personal narrative about what that meant for the people in our locality and actually specific people. And I don't want to get too deep, but I mean, I suppose one of those people passed away within the last month, and I carried his coffin. And before he passed away, I went in with the 3 cups we won into him in the bedside, and he said that it was the greatest moment of his life. And like, there was more than one of those people. So I think probably, maybe it's not the one non-negotiable value, but it was probably the one that was most empowering. Because we were coming out to perform, we're very in the moment, process-based, like Ian was talking about earlier, clear in mind, but we were connected to something bigger. And I think even the way we won the match, if we weren't connected to something beyond ourselves, and it was just about the All-Ireland, like what's the All-Ireland, the medal, it doesn't really mean anything. It's really the spirit and the why. And I think that's what got us over the line. So that's the one I would talk to.
The ball was literally rattling the back of the net as the whistle blew. It was that dramatic. It was, I mean, I've never seen as thousands of people with their mouths open at the same time with shock. It was, now it really was, I was down to the milliseconds about how you won it. But it was what was clear and evident that day as well was the sense of belief that it was up until that moment that there was clearly, there was no question about what was going to happen that day. So self-transcendence, and just in case anyone's unfamiliar with that term, I'm not going to explain what it is, but I am going to remind you where you might have heard it before. It's at the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So in case anyone's not familiar with that, you'll find it there. Brendan, could I go to you next on this one? Upvoted by 7 people. And this is, for retention, so specifically retention, how important is team culture versus compensation?
Oh, wow.
Owen mentioned 2 C's already, clarity and communication. Now we have another 2, culture and compensation.
My gut reaction to that is it depends on the time frame in which you're asking that. At the moment, obviously with inflation where it is and challenges around compensation generally, it's a huge challenge. But for the long term, in my view, culture is everything, right? Now, that's not to make light of the compensation piece. I mean, at the end of the day, look, of course, compensation has to be fair and reasonable. It's not just about, comparison to the market. It's about all the internal equity issues and so on that any organization, smart organization today has to be hugely focused on. But, for me, though, culture speaks, really by a factor of 10 above compensation in terms of its impact. In terms of the team dynamic, we've talked about some of those issues, the challenges of managing performance and all of that. But when I think about, for example, the management role, whether it's around empowerment, growing people, coaching people and so on, we also have to equip people with the skills in order to do the job. And I'm not talking about the professional skills, the technical skills or whatever. It's about understanding expectations. And in the context of, the remote or hybrid environment, that's obviously hugely challenging. But simple things for managers where they need to be much more crystal clear about what is the decision matrix in this organization, right? And that's about helping people in this new world understand what's expected of them. In other words, things like, what sort of things that might happen where you have to come forward and propose something for approval to management. The other end of that, what can you just get on with and deal with? Issues about, escalation, if there's a crisis issue, some issue that's not provided for in the budget, that you have to come forward with. So having a very clear matrix around decisioning for individuals to understand, well, look, I know that if that issue arises, I have to go to John or Mary or whatever it is, but those sorts of issues, I don't. So it's about, demystifying, I suppose, what's the expectations on me, as well as having the clarity, as Owen has talked about the clarity of goal and purpose and so on. And the culture, and if it's a team-based culture, we have to create the time and space for people to build that. And I actually think one of the huge challenges at the moment in this whole attraction and talent agenda is about onboarding. I have 2 family members who've changed jobs twice in the last 2 years, and they haven't left the home office. Yeah. Right? People aren't getting to meet people. Okay, thankfully that's changing. To my mind, a really assertive onboarding policy is hugely important for new talent joining an organization in this new context in which we're now talking. My own personal view is I think, there will always be exceptions, but people should be in the office onboarding probably for certainly the first maybe 6 weeks or thereabouts, with a very direct support, mentoring, buddy system, whatever you want to call it, whereby they can ask all the stupid questions, get clarification, but also get to meet people, whether it's in a team environment or on a cross-team basis. So practical things like that matter hugely and set the tone for your employment experience and your immersion in the culture of the organization from day one. And I think a lot of organizations aren't good at that, to be honest, are getting better. Bit of catch up going on because everybody's kind of struggling. And the other point about this too is, look, you know, there is no one model fits all here. Mistakes are and will be made, but that's okay. And there is nothing wrong, in my view, either, from doing a periodic reset of, you know, whether it's a remote model or a hybrid model or whatever you know, the approach is that's being adopted, because this is so dynamic. Technology is changing all the time. You know, increasingly for collaboration, you know, people aren't using, you know, email and all the rest of it, as we know. They're using other online channels for progressive teamwork and innovation and all of that, and for communication. And that's clearly going to move at a huge pace. And that's going to force further changes in the how teams are configured. But that's okay.
So demystifying the decision matrix, understanding that there's a lot of change going on. And also, I think, you know, just as you were saying about 2 family members onboarded in 2 new companies over the last 2 years, you know, that awkwardness of like, do I use that cup? Am I going to sit in someone's chair? You don't have any of that, which is your own. Really, when you're sitting at home on that. Brian, there's another question that's come in, been upvoted here 6 times. Clearly, I think it's for you. How can you measure if the hybrid model is working for the organisation on an ongoing basis? So again, I'll just read that out, and it's been upvoted 6 times. How can you measure if the hybrid model is working for the organisation on an ongoing basis?
So I think that the key thing is to ask the question, to ask people how is it going on, is it working, is it being effective, and to look at other KPIs around that. So you will look at, I mean, you're talking about the kind of very clear goals that people are set and they have to achieve, and you can see, are people actually achieving those? So if you have a hybrid model, you could look cross-check against those, and you can also ask people just in terms of what's going on for them. You can check around different metrics like, you know, stress or well-being or sentiment or any of these things, you know, L&D. You can look at these things and go, are people, you know, how are they feeling on across these metrics, and check in there. And if there is something, you know, awry, then you ask a little bit further. You go in and say, well, look, we have an issue, you know, in this particular area with something. So whether it's, you know, it is stress or something like that with a particular group of people, engineers, whatever that might be, or QA, and you ask, well, what's happening? And maybe it could be down to the hybrid model or something else. But the question, the way to do it is to ask that question and to do it periodically. Okay, so for us, for the last while, we've been working with multiple companies, and we've been kind of looking through the data about. So we capture kind of a myriad of kind of metrics around different things like well-being, like workload, like productivity, and so on. And we kind of figured out, you kind of see what's happening for people in different locations, whether it be remote or not, how they're responding to things, and you can see that there's different patterns there. And the thing then is to go in and ask the question, well, what's going on for this particular team? A manager will have a sense of what's happening, or it might be something really simple, like, yeah, they don't have access to particular materials they should have had, or didn't have an ergonomic assessment. It could be anything, you know, but you need to ask the question. That's the key thing.
It's not often we get a chance to talk to a psychometrician, so while I'm on this point, when you say ask the question, ask it systematically, do you mean ask the same questions?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So basically the key thing is, and look, for me, I'm extremely passionate about this area, and I know that there's a kind of thing out there with survey fatigue and so on, but the problem is a legacy issue with bad questions and bad data, right? Data driven is in some ways a misnomer. It's meaningful data is what you want, and you have to ask the right questions, and it takes time to develop a scale to measure key things like engagement. It takes time to measure key things like, you know, even to go towards self-transcendence, you know, what is that? You know, it takes time to aggregate that information, make something reliable. And the reason why you ask things again is because you get a benchmark, and then you can repeat, you cycle it, and you can predict things. So for us, we can look at retention over time, and we can now see that a company's going to lose people 3, 4, 5 months ahead of time in a particular area, because we know what we're asking is reliable, and we can predict off the basis. Does that make sense? So that's what you do. You repeat and you cycle like that for a reason. And it can be, and the other thing about it is you don't want, you know, the day of the annual survey is kind of gone. The idea is that you want to ask kind of shorter, briefer questions and then dig deeper to get to a root cause. There's absolutely no point in you saying, okay, we found there's a stress problem or a well-being problem because we've got a scale, and we leave it there and one size fits all. As I said in my previous, you know, the previous thing I was saying there was that stress is different for each one of you. Okay, so we can't, and it could be to do with a team. You need to find out that there's a stress problem or there's a productivity problem, whatever that case might be, based on a cycled metric or something like that, and you ask what's the issue, and that's the key thing. You get to the root cause, and what will happen is the people, from a data-driven or a bottom-up approach, will give you the issue that's actually occurring for them. More than likely, if you set a one-to-one or something like that, you mightn't figure out what the problem is, because people, they've self-preservation bias and they might lie, or they might want to say anything. So that's what you do.
Okay. It's interesting though that your immediate answer to that question was ask, and that's often the thing, is that we might say, I wonder what's wrong with them, but if you ask. In the first place.
Yeah, they'll definitely give you the answer. Like, that's the thing. Like, we've seen it with multiple companies where if people will pay for solutions or try to figure something out and haven't asked. At no point in your life would you ever sit down with anyone on a team, in a family, or anything like that, and say, "Oh, there's a problem. I'm just going to shove a solution here." The person has. The people you're talking to there's a problem there. Ask them, and they'll probably say, "Oh, it is meetings on Zoom. I'm working overtime. I'm burnt out because I'm not doing this, or I don't like that project." And you're like, "Right, we need to sort that out," as opposed to something else.
Okay, well, somebody has directly asked of you, Owen, the next question, and it's been upvoted 8 times. Owen, how do you deal with colleagues who do not want to go back into the office at all? And are you one of them?
No,
You've only been out for the first time in 2 years.
I can tell you that. Before the pandemic, I worked in offices. I travelled a lot because of the different countries, but I was in the office. I would never have seen myself as someone who would have been comfortable working at home. And for clarity, I would be more of an introvert. So that would probably be something that would maybe naturally suit me a little bit more. Says me, sit up here on a stage today. Look, we worked with people to develop a model that could be flexible for people. So if people don't want to go back into the office, that's okay. What we have tried to do is find some balance, because to the points made, social interaction there's still benefits to it. So what we've committed to is a minimum of 3 company activities a year. So we'll have a Christmas party, a summer party, and then we do our annual Serve with Liberty Day, which is just getting all the teams out into nature or doing something to add benefit to the community. So we will encourage people to be part of those things. But we have created a flexible model, as I said. Now, if for a reason we need someone to come into the office, that's part of the agreement. So that's what everyone has collectively agreed to. In some instances, we've had a small number of people who don't like working at home and want to work in the office. And as I said, we've made our offices available. So I think we are really giving people choice, but the choice isn't linked to performance. We will manage our performance through all of our old means. The choice isn't linked to, or the choice is linked to our values, which is, we want people to be in a situation where they can be open, where they can add value, where they can make a difference. And really the way we've looked at it is, look, if someone's delivering, well, the question we have to ask ourselves is, does it matter if they're delivering at home or in some other part of the country or in the office? And for us, the answer has been no. If they are delivering and they're doing what we need to do. But I say that because we've had so much focus on culture and values, and that's when I was looking at the 3 pieces earlier on. For me, it's culture every time. If you have a really strong culture, you will have high-performing people. You will have retention, because you've created an environment that people can be successful in and want to be successful in. And I suppose for all of us, that's the goal. So whether I'm working from home or whether I'm in the office, I want to be successful. I want to be helping people. I want to be making a difference. And that's our core value that we live by. So
you see performance and retention as a subset of culture every time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. There's more questions here. Unfortunately, I don't have time to get to them. I'll read them out just so you're aware of them. 9 people want to know, if you have an underperforming team, how do you communicate that without damping the spirit of the team? And another person asks, and 6 upvotes, any advice on how to deal with frustration in teams where there's not enough autonomy? So, unfortunately, I can't ask you those directly, but what I do have time to do, in the same way as I did with the first panel, could I ask each of the 4 of you to leave us with one tangible takeaway today? Brendan, we'll start with you, and I'll just come down the panel in that order.
If something isn't working, don't be afraid to acknowledge that and to go again, because this is not a perfect science. And I think there's also a need for much more honesty within organizations about in design of these models, which increasingly in the public debate tend to be a lot focused about well-being and flexibility and employee flexibility, which is understandable. But it has to work for the business and it has to work for customers. At the end of the day, who are the key focus for the organisation. But if something isn't working, go again. Don't be afraid to try something new. But the other kind of big issue, I think, that needs a lot of work too is managerial mindset. Because, and in particular for middle management, who increasingly, in my experience, feel squeezed because they're feeling the pressure from on high in terms of the leadership challenge about getting this right, but they're also getting, the grassroots response from their employee base about what's working, not working, and they're expected to fix it. Not always with all the tools and training that they should have.
So if it is broken, do fix it, basically.
Absolutely.
Okay. Shane?
Yeah, I'd say in a high performance environment, a lot of people look for, okay, what's the 10%, that extra 5%, that little nugget that'll change the future of the organisation forever. But I'd actually say, look at the bottom 90%. What are the fundamental pillars that we need to perform or build culture or retain our employees, and focus on doing that as best as you can and better than everyone else. So one of the things that struck me there today was in the concept of psychometrics. I'd love to do a data analytics on the effect of sleep on retention, culture and performance, because when people are sleep deprived, their negativity bias increases in a phenomenal way. So that one fundamental measure could be the difference between culture, retention and performance beyond everything else. Yet we are up here talking about all these other different things up here. So I'd say look at the fundamental building blocks and get those right. And what are they in your organisation?
Okay, great. Brian?
So I've jumped around about 14 different things here now. But basically, I believe too, like culture is performance, it's retention, it affects them both. Okay, I think it's a continuous thing that needs to be assessed periodically to understand people, and people need a voice to feel like they're part of something bigger, so they can transcend, or else they can or they can deliver for a team. Right? You mightn't get to that point, but they can deliver for a team. So you need to ask the question periodically about what's going on for people, allow them do it in a way that's they've a psychologically safe way of sharing that information, and then you need to act on it. That's what I would say.
And Owen?
For me, I would say empower your people, make sure that your objectives are simple, clear and aligned to your company values, and to the points made earlier, keep talking to people, keep asking questions to ensure that you are listening and that you're making change on the back of what people want.
Well, I'm just going to summarise what I took out of that, just to show you just the sheer amount of what you've gone through there. So, Brendan, you spoke about the challenge of being in diverse locations and also integrators versus segmenters. You also said it's so important to communicate goals and perspectives and be very clear about demystifying the decision matrix in an organisation. You said overscheduling and having little time to think is a key issue, and also you mentioned proximity. When it came to the question of culture versus compensation, you said in the long term culture will win, and you have to equip people to do your job. Shane, you spoke about being in a high performing team, understanding what the result is, breaking down silos, humility versus ego, personal relationships and enabling them to connect on a more vulnerable basis. And then there will be a lot more open-minded to conflict. There has to be group commitment to starting with why, and self-transcendence is about connecting to a spirit beyond the individuals. Brian, you were talking about how you listen and how you interact is key. It does take time to get there. You have to do it systematically. You're still dealing with the legacy of bad questions of the past and changing that. This really feeds into your retention. Words matter. There needs to be a democratic way to share, and also to acknowledge and recognise people is how you show that you're listening. And in order to find out what's wrong, ask and you will hear. And then, Owen, you also mentioned that it's important to be incredibly transparent, that the pandemic accelerated what you were doing anyway. 93% of people in your organisation said they didn't want to go back to the pre-way of working. You need to work harder to make sure objectives are much clearer, aligned with the company. Lots of communication happens along the way. And also your social interaction is going to happen 3 times of the year. But particularly you linked this with the end. You said choice isn't linked to performance, but to your values. So, on that note, can we give a round of applause to each of our 4 panellists today? Thank you. Thank you very much indeed to each of the 4 of you. So it brings us now to the last part of today, where we're going to have a very different conversation. I'm first of all going to invite Colin Donnery to come back up on stage. Peter McKenna, I'm also going to invite to come on stage as well. He is the Commercial Director of the GAA. And also Breed Stack, of course, of course, Cork legend herself. So if I can ask you please to please come on stage. Okay, so where we're going to go in this conversation relates to the Home Truths campaign, the connection between FRS and the GAA, and also, Breed, we're going to get some of your own story as well as being an end user, if you could say that, of the GAA Go campaign as well. So, Colin, first of all, what's it been like to be on the FRS side of the partnership with the GAA?
Yeah, so it's sort of been an unbelievable sort of experience, to be honest. We, as I said earlier, we met the guys out, and I wasn't invited out to Sydney a few years ago for the Kilkenny-Galway match, but the team were, and they rang me and they said, "Oh, the GAA want to talk to us about this big idea," and I was like, "Oh God, here we go, a whole pile of cash," So, but we sat down with the team, and look. Because I'm in Ireland, so I hadn't seen the GAA Go platform, and what it is, and Peter will explain, is a partnership between RTE and the GAA, and basically streams every match across the world to Irish people and non-Irish people across the world, and so we looked at it and we sat down with our creative team Ringers, and we sat down with the GAA, and first of all we thought about this whole thing of, we'll put ads up to get people back. We'll have this sort of almost rolling, sales job and a different type of thing. And the Ringers guys sort of put us straight, saying, "You don't want to do that, And I think the GAA themselves didn't want the people watching the games interrupted as well. It was really important to them. And so when I did the numbers didn't work, right? So I was like, this, in terms of outcomes, so I'm a very sort of bottom line sort of guy, and I always have been, and the numbers sort of didn't work, and I went away and I sort of talked to a few people, and I actually talked to a few my local. I'm a Dub. I've been on the stage with two Cork women now. Is really sort of a challenge for me, and stuck in the middle of them.
Exactly, yeah. I put it there for a reason.
But look, I live in a community now. I'm from a mile up the road here. And I lived in North County Dublin in a place called Garristown when I was a kid for 5 years, which is just like, you don't get any deeper blue than Garristown, like, you know what I mean? And and I now live in a place in Laois called Camras, which is like the hurling version of Garristown. And they said to me when I came down there, like, do you play hurling? No. Well, look, you'll always be a nobody around here. You know what I mean? Even if you find the cure for cancer type of thing, And so I talked to people about it, And we, as a club in Camras, had a lot of people, particularly Boston and Oxford in the UK, and it was this thing about people leaving. It was like, where have all these people gone? And it's just so embedded in the community, and as I mentioned at the start, we're a cooperative, so for us it's not all about the profit. So I was able to go back to our board and say, look, there's something sort of bigger here with this. Yeah. There's something a bit bigger. Look, if we get someone back and we get them a job, but actually being involved in transmitting our national games, partnering with, look, people say the greatest sports organisation in the world, but probably one of the greatest actual organisations in the world, to be involved with that, to be involved with the players and, with the likes of Bridge, it's just, and Shane talked about it, it transcends, it's a different thing, it's a different purpose. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of where we got to, and we came up. Look, when the Ringers guys came back and says, right, well, we're going to have 70 minutes of cows and Kerry walking, around Dingle, and the grass been 70 minutes of people watching the grass been cut on Crow Park, and 70 minutes of a fire burning. You're just going like, this is all a bit mad, like, But actually, interestingly, I was in Riyadh. I was telling one of the lads earlier from the IDA in Riyadh with the Taoiseach, and back in October, and we were talking to a few people, and I had a few GAA Go passes to give around, and I gave one to and he was like, "Is that's G?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is." He goes, "Last weekend, my girlfriend was watching it." And she started crying and so what we did was we've 70-minute films running after. So 5 minutes before we had a clip of the films, we have the ad during the break, and then a 70-minute film. People were watching the films. So the match would finish, and they would watch the film, and it sort of brought them home, you know. And it was just an amazing thing to be involved in. And as Kat said earlier, you know, it's emotional. You know, it's more about the emotion, and it's about transporting people back. And when you can do that to people, particularly, like, again, it was just a bit sort of, we sort of panicked, being honest, and I'd say, you know, Peter's team probably felt that when COVID happened, because we went, Christ, we've signed up for a 3-year deal with this thing. We don't know where we're going to be in 6 months. How are people? But actually, the funny thing was, it actually worked perfectly, because everyone was at home watching the matches. Do you know what I mean? And it just sort of, you know, amplified that that sort of home feeling, and people just tapping into that sort of, into the games and that. And I've talked too much. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, Kathleen, actually, I mean, she did say earlier on when she was on our panel, said, you know, it was a time when people were more homesick than ever before and could do nothing about it in many ways. So it's the perfect time to be taking that. Peter, can you share with us what has it been like to be on the other side of this engagement?
That's been very positive. I think Ringers are a great agency, and what they really delivered was something very, very unique. Now, who would ever think of putting a 70-minute ad? You know, Coca-Cola spent millions to develop a 30-second ad. So this is 70 minutes. And the idea was to, you know, just be completely different. So hats off to Colin and his team. It's a very courageous decision to go with that. Now, what we have with GA Go, we're very proud of, where it's, we stream all of our matches, 150 matches. It's available in 180 countries. That's more than Starbucks. Very proud of that too. Across all 5 continents. And so we were delivering a really, really passionate Irish audience that when you have, you know, what FRS do, and it's, to my mind, nearly as important as the IDA. We have 60,000 job vacancies in the country, and FRS are looking to recruit Irish people to come back home again, and doing it in a way which is very, very honest. And you know, they're more recent ad, and I really like the guy coming out of the water, you know, all by himself, saying that's something I love doing myself. But it's so I think it's a great then connection, you know. So people want to watch the match, and you can imagine you're watching an All-Ireland final. If you're in Australia, it's very, very early in the morning, or if it's in San Francisco, it's very late at night. And to hang on then and watch the rest of it and reminisce and just say, yeah, do you know what? That's what home's about. Wouldn't it be nice to be back? And I think that's the type of connection we wanted to get across. And it worked. This was nominated for a European Sponsorship Award last year, which is, you know, a tremendous achievement for a first time around. But yeah, huge courage, and thank you for that, Colin.
And Breed, you have been that person in Australia getting up in the middle of the night to watch the All-Ireland final. And in fact, a few years ago, people would have been getting up in the middle of the night to watch you play in the All-Ireland final as well. So what has it been like to be the end user of GAA Go?
Yeah, I suppose my first experience of it really was in 2020. It was an opportunity that came around for me to travel to Australia and take up an AFLW career, something that I thought was very far past me, to be honest. But so myself, my husband and my young son, he was 1 at the time, we packed up and headed a very isolated Dublin airport because it was, I suppose, a lockdown here. So our flight got changed. It was supposed to be going to Adelaide to a kind of a nice, easy, open quarantine where we kind of had a little bit of a balcony and kind of a bit more free time, to a very hard quarantine in Perth. Within the space of a couple of hours, we got diverted to Perth. And yeah, we ended up inside in a hotel room for 14 days quarantine with a 1-year-old who didn't have the greatest hand-eye coordination for spilling milk and stuff all over the place. But we ended up inside there for 14 days and we ended up going, on the 11th of December, and on the 12th of December started the 4 All-Ireland finals between the 12th of December and the 19th, I think, of December. And we were in quarantine until the 25th. We actually came out Christmas Day. But those 4 games, I cannot put into words we were so far away from home, inside a room, just looking at each other, and just that connection to home straight away. There were times, I suppose, at the start, I was like, geez, what am I doing? Like, yes, there's an excitement attached to it, but I was taking a small boy away from home and everything. You were kind of questioning, was I doing the right thing? But those 4 games, I cannot quantify what they meant to be watching them. Now, we stayed up fierce late and everything, but by God, it was worth it. We had 4 cracking games, and I suppose, you know, that connection piece, I can only, I suppose, expanding it further is on the 25th. I got a text from a man on the 24th of December, a man I had met with you over in Bangkok at the Asian Games, Alan Burke. I had met Alan 2017, I would imagine. He came over to the Asian Games in a refereeing capacity, and he texted me on the 24th of December going, I know you're in Perth, I know you're quarantining in Perth, and I want to invite you and your family to come and have Christmas dinner with us tomorrow. Something just unbelievable, and just that connection piece when you're so far away from home. The GA brought me to Alan in the Asian Games, and I suppose the GA kept us nearly going during that quarantine. And then, you know, that connection piece, that when Irish people are away from home, there's just nothing like it, and really looking out for each other. So we had a great day.
A few of them by the sound of it. Colin, when people make a decision to come home to work, like to answer the 60,000 vacancies that Peter meant, they don't just do it with their hearts, they do it with their minds as well. But of course, they do have to make a logical economic decision too. So what goes through somebody's decision-making process in order to make that decision to go home, to take up a job? And what does that mean then for the area that they come back to?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I would have thought they come home to work, right? But they don't come home to work, right? So that's not their I think, first thing, you know. It's about getting home to their community. It's about that, you know, that just life really that they had previously. That's the first, that's what draws them, right? So it's not like, and we've got to be realistic about this as employers. Yeah, as an employer, you know, you're not top of their list. Like FRS isn't top of their list as an employer, you know what I mean? It's their family, it's the sport, it's what they've left behind, right? So that's the number one thing. Then the head starts coming in. So once they've made that decision, then they start thinking. So it's sort of, they look at the job itself, etc. Then they start looking at, well, where are we going to live? You know what I mean? And look, that's a big question at the moment, and there's a lot of negativity out there around housing and stuff like that. And look, in our business, we're always looking for accommodation for people. It is chronic out there, in particularly, like, for the first time since in my lifetime in rural Ireland. Like, if you look at places we're headquartered in Roscrea, you can't get a house in Roscrea. Like, it's absolutely bonkers sort of stuff that's going on out there. You know what I mean? So there's that. Then it's, if they have children, it's about where they're going to go to school. You know. And those sort of, they're life decisions, you know. And we actually partner with some great companies out in Australia, you know, from moving companies and all that sort of stuff. Locally then here, we put them in touch with you know, the experts on the ground really to help them, because a lot of the time people are coming back, not necessarily to their particular home place, but they're getting back to Ireland. Do you know what I mean? But the great thing I think about, look, if there's anything positive about the pandemic is, like, a lot of people who were in, say, Sydney, right, who are from, say, rural Cork or something like that, would have thought, I'm never getting back to rural Cork to live, ever. But remote working and the whole change in the thing has actually allowed that to start to happen. Do you know what I mean? And for companies who are outside of Dublin, it's allowed them to start to compete for that talent. You know what I mean? And I think that's what really we're seeing on the ground, you know. Yeah,
it's interesting, as you say, that coming home to work is secondary. It's the other areas beside it.
Heart comes first and head comes second.
Head comes second. And so, Peter, I mean, in essence, when you're working with an organisation, I mean, you describe FRS as being courageous to take that, to take the sponsorship, and also creating the 70-minute ad, as you say. But what creative solutions can you bring to the table then from the GA's point of view when you're dealing with partnerships or sponsors that ties in with the sustainability of the organisation, but also pays homage to the 700,000 members that you have across the country?
Yeah, it's. I think what you tried to do is respond, you know, to where where the target company is looking to express themselves and do that in a way which is authentic. So to give you some examples, with Super Value and Centra, we sell all of our match tickets exclusively through the shops. So that means that people will go in there, they go in a rural area, they go in just as much for the chat as to shop, and it's a way of connecting with everybody. And that relationship worked very well, even more so when it was during the pandemic, because when Leo Varadkar made his famous speech from Washington, where we want anyone over 60 to hibernate. There was no sense, well, how does anyone eat or get medicine or anything delivered to their house? So the GA network really came to us for at that time, and Super Value and Centra were brilliant in making sure that we could deliver shopping to individuals without them having to pay for it. They could then ring in and pay for it rather than they just changed the whole till system. So that's how the partnership becomes very, very much, as Bree says, community-centric. Cool Camps is another great example of where Kellogg's, the only expression they do outside the US is the Cool Camps that they sponsor here in Ireland. 180,000 children are involved in Cool Camps in Ireland. That's 1 in 4 in the target age group. It's an unbelievably successful campaign. And it is about getting young people out and not competing, but enjoying themselves and having a laugh and running around and doing what children should do, but doing it in a very, very safe environment. So that's, you try and marry what the sponsor wants to achieve, what we can deliver. And if it works, and invariably it does, you're hoping that the partnership will go on for years. So our partnership with Allianz and with AIB is coming up to a quarter of a century. So that's gone through maybe 10 different management teams and 10 different teams here in Croke Park over a long period of time, because everything innovates and changes, and the relationship works.
And Breed, Peter there speaks about making things work, putting people at the heart of it and everything else. If it's okay to ask you, and you can tell me if it's not, but during the time you were in Australia, you went through quite an emotional roller coaster. Like, apart from the fact that you were bringing the small boy away from home, the injury happened. And I went back and I watched it happen again. I went back and I looked at the video again. And I also looked at the video of where you were first picked then to go on your debut 11 months later. And then I watched Corach bring in Corach Og just at that moment. They were like, while it was a short period of time you were away, there were big, big milestones happening in your life. What is it like to really be away from home and needing that connection from home at those moments?
Yeah, I suppose no sooner had we come out of that first quarantine I spoke about, we had to go into a hub because, again, I suppose they were, COVID was definitely picking up traction over in Australia, so we went into a hub facility. So that meant I had 2 weeks. So I missed a lot of the pre-season just because of COVID and over and back and trying to get out there, trying to get flights over in the first place. And thankfully we got a visa that allowed it. But when I did get into that hub, I had 2 weeks of, I suppose, living with these girls. I didn't know them from Adam, but when I think back now of just how important that hub was, because what it meant was that I was thrown into, I suppose, getting to know these people, getting to know them so well in a very, very short space of time. And unfortunately, 2 weeks later, when we played our first challenge, our first kind of practice game, went the whole 70 minutes of the game and unfortunately suffered a serious neck injury. So I suppose from then, I had to put complete trust in these people that I knew 2 weeks, which sounds absolutely mad, but it's just something unbelievable about team culture. And I think I've been so fortunate in my career that I have been involved with fantastic Cork Ladies football team, which was basically like a club team, and it still is. Like, we're still meeting up to this day and, reminiscing on absolutely everything. It was like a club team to me. So to think that I could go across, I suppose, to the other side of the world and see that I had people that I was forced to trust straight away. They looked after my son like he was their own when I was in hospital. It was just unbelievable. But I suppose you definitely, when something like that happens, it's probably nearly harder for the people at home. For mum and dad, I know they found it very, very difficult being so far away from home. So communication was absolutely vital. But yeah, look, as it progressed, I suppose, you know, if I went over for a reason, I went over to try to play. And I suppose, look, I'm a stubborn old mule sometimes. So I said, look, I'm going to make a success of this, because I could have easily just got on the plane, come home to mum and dad, and I suppose, you know, had kind of drawn a line in it. But it was important to me, it was important to my family that I make it a success and that I got back on the playing field. I'd never sustained a very serious injury before, thankfully, in my playing career at Cork. So maybe naivety was definitely propelling a lot of it. I was like, right, grand, a neck break, 6 weeks, that'll be fine. We'll do the 6 weeks and we'll be able to get back out. But unfortunately, it took a lot longer. There was just a bit of nerve damage as well, which unfortunately slowed me down a bit. But I cannot put into words what it meant to, I suppose, get back onto the field and do all that. But to fly home and to come in and to see, you know, get a bit worked up.
Well, I remember
to see the green fields of Ireland. I suppose just coming in and seeing the green fields of Ireland, it was like being wrapped in a comfort blanket. It really was. So it is very difficult being away from home when something traumatic happens, because you know that if something, you know, unfortunately happens at home in Ireland, you have initially, I suppose, look, there's a GA club in every single village in Ireland, and you know, there's nothing that rallies a place together when something happens, one of their own. So like that community ethos is just like nowhere in the world, absolutely nowhere. And while I had such a supportive network and an unbelievable network, there is nothing like the comfort you get from your own people and your own village and your own county. And I just coming in, I suppose, and seeing Dublin and seeing the green fields of Dublin definitely was a feeling I'll never ever forget. And yeah, it was wonderful to come home, and yeah, obviously very, very emotional. And then sure, God bless us, I told them a couple of months later that I was going back out, so they nearly lost the count of me. I'd say they were nearly to ready to strap me to the kitchen table, but look, they knew my reasons for going back out. I wanted to, I suppose, just felt I had a bit of unfinished business with it. But that first instant, I suppose, when we were away, I was already very conscious of taking a grandson away from his grandparents, but I suppose just that connection, like I said, even just little things like I spoke about that, the first quarantine, but throughout that time, we relied on GA Go loads throughout that time. Yes, I had my own injury rehab that we were doing, but there was always that connection with home through the GA app, and the WhatsApp groups are constantly, you know, going, even if it's like stupid o'clock in the morning. It's just, I suppose, being away from home, you get a bit more Irish, I think, you know, you definitely do get a bit more Irish, and like, yeah, like what I wouldn't have done for a 99 after that happened, but yeah, no, like it's, I suppose it has definitely opened my eyes. I never went away for any period of time. Thankfully, I had a successful career at Cork that I never had the want or the desire to go do a J1, never went away for longer than 10 days of a break. So the chance to go and travel was always like a fantastic, I suppose, opportunity that came with playing sport, and to be able to marry that with my family was very, very special. But there is nothing like coming home, I can tell you. You know, and
even to Dublin, even into Dublin.
Yeah, well, like we got the air coach down fairly fast over there, so it was great. Yeah, so it's nice.
As we bring the conversation to a close, Peter, I just wanted to maybe ask you, when you look at having a sponsorship, as you can see there from Breed, this means so much to people. So apart from money, what do you look for?
Well, for it to work, I think that there must be a compatibility, you know, particularly on values. I don't sound too precious about it, but I mean, there's certain areas we won't go to as a sporting organisation. But by and large, all of our sponsors are very, 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 very sympathetic to what the GA is about. It's about inclusivity. It's about getting people out to play. The important ones for us, and Breed would say exactly the same, of the 700,000 members, all of the young kids that get out every Saturday and the parents that bring them out. there are 2,000 elite athletes, and they're the ones that we all enjoy and go and watch in our thousands. But it's the GA at the weekend for younger people. That's what really gets us motivated and kicked on. And what you want is sponsors that see that and understand that and are interested in how they can be part and integrate with the community, as opposed to seeing exactly what the ROI is. The ROI will never work if you look at it too closely from a GA perspective, but that's not why you're involved in it. You're involved in it because we are the community. We represent so many hundreds of thousands of people across the island. And that's what you buy into, that authentic Irish experience.
Well, I mean, in many ways, this conversation is finishing where it started, which is, it may not, as you say, make sense to the bottom line, but it's about something bigger. And as Shane said, that self-transcendence. Final word to you on this, Colin. Where do you see the future of this partnership going? Allianz are there a quarter of a century now, so...
So look, we signed up to this for a 3-year deal, and we're sort of in conversations at the moment with Peter's team. We've actually looked at other I suppose products within the GA over the last sort of 12 months. And just as an aside, I think it's fantastic to see Camogie and Ladies GA now much more integrated, and you know, inclusivity thing is going to become very, very front and center. I think that's critical for the organisation, and we see that from an employer perspective, you know, and I think that's going to be a key feature. So yeah, look, we're hoping that you know, we can work with the GA well into the future. Peter has to talk to his sort of board, and I have to talk to my board and make it work and convince both sides that this makes sense, even though potentially it, as we said, it doesn't on paper sometimes, you know.
Well, on that note, maybe we might then take a look at the video, Home Truths. If I could ask Aaron there to please pull that up. So let's just see exactly how 70 Minutes of Home is now turning to Home Truths. And I also noticed that Colin was tweeting about the importance of chips.
We all know that Dublin chips are the best chips,
well,
don't we?
No, Dee knows now, and Jackie Lennox is down a country.
I know her both of where she's talking about.
Yeah,
she's
I know,
right.
Yeah. So like #athlete, like we don't eat them.
So we're just going to bring up this here and take it away. And as I say, this is all around Home Truths, which, as Kathleen said from earlier, is markedly different from 70 Minutes of Home, as people are at a different stage. But I'm going to stop talking now because I'm probably holding things back from below.
Here's a few home truths for you. Near Knock, people are seeing things again. In Castleknock, house prices are still mad. In Castlebar, the remote working hub is a pub. In Furbo, they're doing 9 to 5 here and 1 to 2 here. In Athlone, they're building champions and bridges. Leitrim has just the one traffic light. Plenty of spirit though. In Sallins, there's never been more trains, or schools, or decent coffee. Only FRS knows these things, because we have people all over Ireland. So if your heart wants home but your head has more questions, ask us.
I think they deserve a round of applause for that. So that does indeed bring to an end our conversation today, all about developing great teams at work. We started off this morning with Peter focusing on what the future holds in terms of hybrid working and technology, but yet how people are right there at the core. We then looked at attracting and acquiring talent, and that seemed to be a huge issue based on what you said there on Mentimeter, and how bringing people in and those touch points with those processes. And as I say, Lynn is going to respond to a lot more of the questions that you had. After that, then we went to Professor Ian Robertson, who told us about values and about how confidence is contagious, how we can turn stress into a really massive energizer. And then we went on to hear from each of our 4 people all around retention and culture, and ultimately how culture absorbs both retention and performance as well, particularly aiming at self-transcendence and listening to people, coaching people with that managerial mindset, as well as asking people why they are where they are. And then, of course, we finished up with our panel today all around the relationship between FRS, the comfort blanket of the green fields of home, and as well as about that connection and that cohesion between the GA and FRS. So it really has been such a great pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for tweeting. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for all of your networking. Thank you for your presence. And also I want to say thanks again to to Aaron and Luke as well at the back. Luke made sure I was heard, but I'd have done it anyway, I can tell you. So thank you very much indeed to Avcom and also to the Croke Park events team as well for making everything happen here today. I do want to let you know that lunch will be served at the table, so you can stay where you are and you can talk away for the day, which I intend to do anyway. And again, on behalf of the team at FRS, a huge, huge thank you to each and every one of you for taking your time out to be here today. Thank you and goodbye.